This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello, good morning. 2 years after the fateful 2020 Australian Grand Prix, which was meant to be the season opener, but with a shambles of cancelled chaos COVID, or COVID chaos even, we are back in Albert Park in Melbourne, and I cannot tell you how good it is to see over 420,000 people pour into the circuit across the weekend. The grandstands are packed. There are people with numerous different shirts on, so many flags fluttering in the gentle breeze just by the lake, and it should be an absolutely brilliant Grand Prix. Definitely worth getting up for, and we get underway in approximately 13 minutes time. It's worth reminding you, it is a 2v1 battle for the crown in Australia. Up front it is Charles Leclerc. He put in an absolutely beautiful lap just as the sun was beginning to set in Australia yesterday, but he's the lone wolf. Just behind him will be Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, the two Red Bull drivers who are at the moment on the grid. Perez getting a little bit of a massage alongside me, wishing they were getting a bit of a massage, but unfortunately not. It is Harry Benjamin, our lead commentator for this weekend, and Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic with McLaren. And Harry, the atmosphere, we're used to this being the season opener. It's round 3, but I think everybody is just so excited by the battle that should ensue.
It's another Red Bull Ferrari fight up front, but the field is incredibly competitive. We've got the likes of Alpine and McLaren on some renewed form, but as you say, the grandstands are packed. It's blue sky, sunshine as well, a slightly altered track to what we're used to seeing at the Australian Grand Prix, but it's such a festival atmosphere as well behind the scenes and off track. Everyone's excited to get the Australian Grand Prix back underway. First race in 3 years.
Mark, I think it's fair to say not many things will get me this excited at 10 to 6 in the morning, but the feeling of this, it just feels right, doesn't it?
It does. It's a special place and a special race, and I've just seen a graphic saying this is a record attendance this year at the Australian Grand Prix, which is great news that people have come back in their droves. And look, we've got a great prospect ahead of us, as Harry just touched on there. We've got one Ferrari fighting two Red Bulls, but a whole load of other stuff going on behind that. Nothing between them. We should have a fantastic race ahead of us this afternoon. Yeah,
with 420,000 attendees over the weekend, it's the biggest weekend sporting event in Australian history.
Wow.
And it's quite nice that it feels like we've come full circle, doesn't it? Where we had the chaos of the whole race being cancelled. We flew out there. I was on Australian ground for 37 hours and then flew back again. And now here we are with an absolutely packed grandstands, a packed park, everybody waiting to see just what Charles Leclerc can do to try and keep his lead. And Mark, that's what everyone's talking about. How on earth can he do it?
Well, that is it. There's a whole load of expectation that comes with this huge crowd and sense of occasion. And Charles Leclerc is the man with all that pressure on his shoulders. He's in a Ferrari that's very, very quick, but he's got two Red Bulls that are very fast in a straight line behind him. We've got 3 DRS zones around this circuit. Harry touched on the fact we've had some changes to the circuit as well. That makes the track quicker, and perhaps in race conditions, that might suit the Red Bulls.
Ooh. Harry,
Ooh.
Come on, get it if you're not excited already. So give us the big sell. Why is this the race to stay listening to?
Well, we're back in Australia, that's the main thing, but also just to go a little bit deeper into these track changes, there have been several points on this track where basically the corners have been widened. They've added an extra DRS zone. We did have 4 at the start of this weekend. 1 has been gone because of safety reasons, but we're back with 3, so it should be a fast and furious track. Hopefully the changes have been made so that we can get more passing. Traditionally, Australia has not been the best for overtaking. However, we can see already at the start of this season that due to the new regulations, cars can follow. Fingers crossed, we should be able to get some epic racing, and it is tight. At one point in qualifying, the two Red Bulls were split by 1,000th of a second. That is nothing, and we've seen last time out the power of the DRS as well, so expect a little bit of strategy to come into play when that is activated.
Right, just a reminder, Charles Leclerc leads the way in the standings with 45 points from his Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz on 33 points. Sainz starts back in 9th place After a bit of a fail yesterday in qualifying by the Ferrari team, the engines wouldn't start, so they had problems there. Got him out late, couldn't set the perfect lap. So he's not up there to support, as we said, Charles Leclerc. But in the standings, Max Verstappen, 25 points after failing to score anything in the first race of this season. And then it's Russell on 22 and Hamilton on 16 points. So we must talk about Mercedes. We've just seen Lewis Hamilton getting his braids together so he can put on his balaclava and then his helmet. He starts P5 just behind Lando Norris in the McLaren, and then it's George Russell. So we've got 3 Brits in a row, but Mercedes looking a little bit better this weekend.
Yeah, they are, and that'll be a real sign of encouragement for them. Having said that, it's in the context of where they are with their car this season. They're not going to be, under normal circumstances, fighting for a win, but the fact that they're sitting 5th and 6th with Lewis and then George Russell behind is actually an improvement from where we were. If you think about last time out in Saudi Arabia, Lewis didn't even make it out of Q3 on the Saturday, and that was a genuine sign of their performance at that track. So they found something, they made some tweaks. This circuit maybe brings it back towards the performance level of their car, and 5th and 6th from there, I think they can do some things. If something happens up front, they could be in the mix.
Will something happen up front at the start of this race? It is one of those, isn't it?
Anything is possible. It is 2 against 1 at the front. More often than not, the pole sitter has not led after the opening lap either. So that is something to watch out for. In fact, the pole sitter has only won 1 in 8 of the last Australian Grand Prix, and that was Lewis Hamilton way back in 2015. And with the ability to pass more in this season, I think we're going to see a lot of chopping and changing going on.
Good luck, Charles Leclerc. That's what we basically need to say. Thank you to you getting in touch this morning. Hashtag BBC F1. Rachel says, good morning, all looking forward to what promises to be an exciting Australian Grand Prix. And Jackie Baker Stubbs, good morning to you. She says it's finally race day again in Australia. She had a grandstand view yesterday, I think it was. Really enjoyed her day, I hope. And fingers crossed you're going to enjoy today as much. Let us know what you're doing. Are you having a cup of tea, maybe a bacon sarnie at 7 minutes to 6 in the morning? We'd love you to share pictures maybe of what you're up to. So get us in your vibe this morning, because we're trying to get you into our vibe. As Mattia Binotto, the Ferrari team principal, looks down at his 2 Ferraris, one of them slightly further back than he would have liked, but Charles Leclerc, pressure on him a little bit. He has been in fine form, hasn't he?
He absolutely has. He's been on form since the very start of this season. Coming into the season, of course, he was beaten by his teammate Carlos Sainz in the standings last year. Everyone thought Sainz might have the upper hand. At the moment, it certainly looks like Leclerc has got the most out of this package that Ferrari are offering at the moment. But how brilliant to see a resurgent Ferrari too, up the front and battling for wins.
Mark Priestley, your former mechanic, so tell us, there's a little bit of kind of, it feels like angst down at Red Bull. They've not had the smoothest run of things today.
No, in fact, it's not been the smoothest weekend for them, to be quite honest. They've struggled to get the car into the right window, and albeit in the end, when it mattered in qualifying, they did, and Max Verstappen just a few tenths behind Charles Leclerc, but he hasn't been comfortable all weekend, and that was only topped off yesterday post-qualifying when they found problems on the number 1 car, the world champions car of Max Verstappen. They found a hydraulic leak, and so they've had to change a number of components this morning to get that car back into its full operating condition. All around the hydraulic system, so clutch actuators, gearbox hydraulic systems and the actuators, all these elements around the gearbox and clutch have been replaced. Now, as a team, that always makes you slightly nervous. Not only did you have the problem in the first place, but now you've got a whole load of untested, brand new components on the car, and you're about to go into the race.
I know how they feel. Right, we have 5 minutes to go until the start of the race, so let's get the latest news with Juliana Cassidy.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is demanding a Whitehall inquiry to find out who leaked details about his wife's tax arrangements. Akshata Murthy says she'll now pay UK taxes on her overseas income after a row about her non-domicile status. President Zelensky has welcomed the UK's support for Ukraine, describing it as decisive and significant. During a surprise visit to Kyiv yesterday, Boris Johnson announced that Britain was sending 120 armed vehicles fuels and new anti-ship missile systems, as well as guaranteeing further loans through the World Bank. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, has been ousted from office after losing a confidence vote. Pakistan's parliament will meet tomorrow to vote for the country's new leader, and voting's taking place today in the first round of the French presidential election. 12 candidates are on the ballot, and the top two will take part in a final runoff vote later this month.
This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Good morning. It is the Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park. The sun is shining. There is a small chance of an odd drop or two of rain, but with the heat coming down in Melbourne, that will not be a problem for anybody. The grid is ready. The celebrities have been ushered off. It's just the mechanics, the engineers and the drivers set to do battle around this spectacular 5.275 slightly altered Albert Park trap. 58 laps will be the count. Let's see if all 20 of our drivers can make it round. We had a lot of people retiring from the race last time out. Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic. Are we thinking this is going to be another race of attrition?
Well, the Australian Grand Prix often is a real race of attrition, and that's one of the reasons, as Harry touched on, that the pole sitter hasn't always won the Grand Prix, but it's normally the first race of a season, so you've got brand new cars, people are still figuring them out, lots of reliability issues. We're now in race 3, so some of those have been figured out, but not for everybody. So yes, I would still expect not all 20 cars to get to the checkered flag at the end of this afternoon.
Aston Martin have had a woeful Australian Grand Prix so far. Sebastian Vettel back after missing both of the first 2 races with COVID. They'll be hoping for a miracle, I think.
I think they'll be hoping to finish in one piece, really, with both cars. It's been a bit of a catastrophic start to their season, and even worse, Australian Grand Prix crashes for both cars in free practice 3. A big crash for Lance Stroll, who received a penalty as well after colliding with Nicholas Latifi in Q1, the first quarter of qualifying. So he starts way at the back. His teammate managed to get out for 1 lap, Sebastian Vettel, to set a flyer, but there's no pace in that car right now. Aston Martin really struggling.
They'll be hoping, as you say, to improve. Alexander Albon and the Williams also had a bit of a dodgy session yesterday with a big crash. Wasn't his fault. However, he had a 3-place grid penalty already, failed to qualify, so be languishing at the back of the starting grid. Now, just to remind you, in case you needed any reminding at all, today is a massive day of sport. Hopefully you've got a pass and you get to watch it all and listen to it all today, because 4:30 this afternoon, it's Man City versus Liverpool, and then from 8 o'clock tonight, the final day of the Masters. It should be fascinating to hear what happens. We will be across it all here on 5 Live across the day. So there we go. We've teed it up for you. You know what you've got to do. We know what's got to be done. Charles Leclerc in pole position as the cars are just about to be lowered down. Most of the teams with an umbrella shielding their drivers from this intense Australian sunshine that beats down. As we said, 58 laps, round 3 of the Formula One World Championship. The whole of Melbourne, the whole of Australia, it feels like, has come out to watch their favourite driver, to see who will triumph in this battle of Ferrari versus Red Bull that has proven to be so exciting this season. And we are only 2 races in, this being the 3rd. So without further ado, let's get the commentary underway. Let's run through the grid. Let's get things started on BBC Radio 5 Live as we come up towards 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Jenny. After a dramatic qualifying yesterday, the grid is set. It's looking like Red Bull versus Ferrari, but there are cars out of position. A brand new era in Formula One. First time racing round in these new cars at the Australian Grand Prix. It's a revitalised Albert Park. 58 laps await us. It's coming up to 3 o'clock in Melbourne, 6 o'clock in the UK. It's time for the Australian Grand Prix. Starting on pole position, Hamilton taking his 11th career pole. It's the Monegasque in the Scarlet Ferrari, Charles Leclerc. Alongside him, his highest ever Australian Grand Prix start, the reigning champ, Max Verstappen, ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. A leading trio of Brits is next. It's Lando Norris in the best McLaren start since 2014 in 4th. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, the two Mercedes drivers, in 5th and 6th. Home hero Daniel Ricciardo starts in 7th, ahead of Esteban Ocon. Carlos Sainz had a shocker in qualifying. He goes from 9th, ahead of Fernando Alonso, who's looking fast, but he crashed out. He starts in 10th. Then it's Pierre Gasly and Valtteri Bottas, who enters 103 consecutive Q3 record. He starts in 12th. Yuki Tsunoda is behind him, and Zhou Guanyu from 14th. Then it's Mick Schumacher in the Haas in 15th, who out-qualifies his teammate for the first time, Kevin Magnussen. He'll start from 16th. Sebastian Vettel, a crash in FP3 and a power unit change. He'll start 17th. Nicholas Latifi crashed into in Q1. He goes from 18th, ahead of Lance Stroll, who crashed into Latifi. He has a grid penalty. He starts from 19th. And last on the grid, disqualified from qualifying for not having enough fuel at the end, it's Alexander Albon in the Williams. Formation lap is underway. All 20 cars getting going as well. It is Charles Leclerc leading the Drivers' Championship right now with 45 points to Carlos Sainz's 33 points. But Mark, we touched on it in the early start of the show as well, as they're coming up to the last couple of corners to set their grid spots. It's very much Leclerc out on his own in the Ferrari. He's got the two Red Bulls behind him, so he's not going to have any help from his teammate who starts back in 9th.
No, and that is a real issue when it comes to strategy. Red Bull have two options. They can play two different strategic games up against the one option that Ferrari have with Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is too far back to affect this, so how is that going to affect this afternoon's race?
As they lay some rubber down on their way to the grid, trying to make sure they have enough grip as possible on their starts as well. It's going to be a fascinating watch. Jenny Gow, they're lining up and they're nearly ready to go.
Yeah, they certainly are. Worth bearing in mind, a few people taking the different strategy. They are on hard tyres, and that is Carlos Sainz starting P9. Alonso behind him is also on hard. Then Albon, Magnussen, Vettel and Stroll all start on the hard. Everybody else on the yellow-banded medium tyre.
Yeah, we are expecting this to be a one-stop strategy, but never say never. Predict the unpredictable in Formula One this year. The new regulations have certainly reshuffled the pack, but at the moment it looks like Ferrari versus Red Bull. We've seen a crash during qualifying, so we may well get some incidents in the race too. We're looking forward to a safe race as well. 58 laps around this revitalised Albert Park circuit, 3.2 miles, 5.2 kilometres, as Alex Albon lines up in his final grid spot. It's the Scarlet Red Ferrari of Charles Leclerc on pole position. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull is alongside him. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing in Australia. It's a decent start from the front row. Leclerc in front, coming across to defend into the braking zone of turn 1. George Russell slides down the inside further back, but it's a clean start from Leclerc and Max Verstappen in 1 and 2. The Alpines trying to find their way through in the middle of the pack as well. Fernando Alonso coming through, and Esteban Ocon fighting with the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, and Lewis Hamilton ahead of Sergio Perez. George Russell fighting the McLarens. Mark.
Amazing start from Lewis Hamilton. Found his way from 5th right up into 3rd place into turn 1. He is now in between the two Red Bulls and in the mix at the front of this race. Who would have said that could be the case after the struggles they've had in the early part of this season?
Daniel Ricciardo, the home hero, seems to have maintained 7th as well. He's gotten behind Lando Norris, who has lost position as well. So the Mercedes with a great start. Lewis Hamilton up to 3rd at the moment, trying to hunt down Max Verstappen. Red Bull and Sergio Perez, he got his first ever pole position last time out. He's trying to regain that position. Movement coming through the fast turn 9 and turn left as Valtteri Bottas nearly loses it, dips the rear left tyre into the grass, manages to carry on. He's fighting further back for 11th. Carlos Sainz has lost positions though. He's trying to recover ground. He's fighting Mick Schumacher in the Haas, and the Ferrari losing out to the Haas.
Carlos Sainz really struggling, looking like he might even have a problem with his pace potentially here, being beaten by Mick Schumacher through the latter part of the lap. But out front it's Charles Leclerc, crosses the line to start lap 2, ahead of the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, closely followed by Lewis Hamilton, none other than Lewis Hamilton in P3 right now.
Just wonder how costly starting on those hard tyres will be for Carlos Sainz. We said warm-up round here was really tricky, makes it a little bit like an ice rink. Maybe that's what he's suffering with.
He could be trying to play the long game as well. Sainz has now fallen down to 14th. He's lost 5 positions. The biggest gainers, well, 2 positions from Hamilton gained. Gasly's gained 2. Russell up 1. Tsunoda up 2. And Mick Schumacher in 13th. But as we make our way round, we're halfway through lap 2. It is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari who leads ahead of Max Verstappen, the reigning champion. Lewis Hamilton is in 3rd. A brilliant start from the 7-time world champion. Sergio Perez is 4th. George Russell is 5th. Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, the 2 McLarens lie astern in 6th and 7th. Ocon, Gasly, Alonso, the top 10. Tsunoda, Bottas, Schumacher, 13th. Sainz, Guan Yu Zhou is in 15th. Then it's Kevin Magnussen, Vettel, Latifi, Stroll and Albon as we see Carlos Sainz off into the gravel, and he has beached it as well. That's on the exit of turn 10. Yellow flags being waved, double yellow flags. He can't get going. He's lost the back end into the gravel and is stopped right now. His teammate, meanwhile, leads from Verstappen.
That's got to be a safety car, I think. Carlos Sainz absolutely beached, facing the wrong way, just at the exit of the corner. I'll be amazed if we don't throw a safety car to get that car recovered. But out front, it's Leclerc, who was just starting to stretch his legs. Yeah, there's no way Carlos Sainz is going anywhere from there. Let's see what he says.
I'm in the gravel. What can I do? Tell them to push me if they can.
He's not allowed to be pushed and then pushed back onto the circuit from those marshals. So he is stuck and out of this race. As we watch a replay, he was overtaking one of the Alphas, went into turn 9 way too quickly, if we're honest, and then just got onto the grass, and he was an absolute passenger for there. So I've got to say, that feels to me like a driver error, unless he was suffering from anything technical in his car, but he went in way too quickly, and the tyres just had no grip to manage that.
Tell you what, it was so lucky that he didn't wipe out half of the grid, because it looks like Zhou Guanyu was right there as the stricken Ferrari was sliding across the track, and I think everybody that started on the hards has suffered, apart from Fernando Alonso, who's an absolute master when it comes to it. Radio again.
Engine off, engine off.
Engine off for Carlos Sainz, and that looks like the Spaniard's race is over. Not even 3 laps in for Sainz, and all he can do is sit in his car. He's still sat there. He's looking to his left because he's facing the wrong way, so he's seeing all of the grid run past him, including his teammate who is leading. And we saw Carlos Sainz make an error there in his qualifying lap as well, as it moves from a virtual safety car to a safety car, so the Aston Martin will be out on track. The field will bunch up, but this has been a bit of a horror weekend for Carlos Sainz.
Well, only in the latter part, because actually he had real good pace, which is what will be most frustrating about this. He had the pace to match his teammate Charles Leclerc in the early phase of qualifying, and unfortunately it's gone from bad to worse since then. But yeah, full safety car out now, so all the field will bunch up behind Charles Leclerc in the lead.
We've just seen a replay of the start as well, and you have to say, Lewis Hamilton with an absolutely brilliant start. It was fairly level-headed actually on the immediate getaway. We're riding on board, that's the sound you can hear of Lewis Hamilton, but he's so late on the brakes and just squeezes in between Sergio Perez on his left and Lando Norris on his right.
And actually the 2 Red Bulls got in each other's way. Sergio Perez had to really back out early into turn 1 because his teammate Max Verstappen chopped out wide across the front of him, and that was what allowed Lewis Hamilton to nip through the gap and up into that 3rd place. So 2 Red Bulls, whilst they should be there helping each other, actually hindering each other a little bit and allowing Lewis up into P3.
Just looking at Lando Norris as well, they've been pretty comfortable with their starts recently at McLaren and pretty pleased with it. However, they haven't made up a place at all. They've lost out on places, and even George Russell managed to nip through ahead of Norris. So I think Mercedes will be looking at that, currently P3 and P5, going, oh, okay, now we're in the mix. What can we do with this? What can they do with this? That's the question.
We just saw a replay of Carlos Sainz, and you're absolutely right, Jenny. The way Carlos Sainz, as an absolute passenger with his car on the colder, hard tyres with very little grip, bouncing across the grass, he stood across the track, absolutely out of control, and just slid in between 2 cars. That could have been a horrible accident.
As the tractor arrives to wheel Carlos Sainz off track, we've just had a pit stop, Jenny.
We have, yes. Coming in is Lance Stroll. He's gone on to the mediums. Now, he started on the hard tyre, and I just wonder if they've realised that actually the performance deficit to that medium is not good. So they've flipped him onto the other tyre there.
Yeah, and of course we should explain for people at home that given that we're under safety car conditions, if he's not comfortable on that tyre, this is the opportunity to take that pit stop with a minimal time loss. Everyone's being led around slowly behind the safety car, so making a pit stop now costs you less effectively than if everyone was racing round at full racing speed.
Yeah, he was languishing at the back as well, so I don't think it was a masterstroke to realise that he needed to come in and maybe make a change. Also worth saying that, yeah, the impact of the safety car, not as big here as at some of the tracks when it comes into the pit stop. It's about a 20-second pit stop in normal conditions. Under the safety car, around 13, 14 seconds. So some of them, it's cut down to about half. This one, it's cut down a little bit less.
That's right. That's the other Aston Martin now comes in to make a pit stop too. And don't forget, because we've had changes to the circuit here, one of those changes is the pit lane has been made wider, and therefore the pit lane speed limit has actually increased from 60 kilometres an hour to 80, which means your pit lane loss is a little bit less than normal.
Yeah, and Jenny, we were just saying that Lance Stroll's coming for a pit. It's not the other Aston Martin, it's Sebastian Vettel that's come in. Stroll has come back in again.
Now this could be clever. This could be Bernadette Collins, who's down there doing the strategy, going, hang on a minute, if we come in, switch tyres, we've used our allocation. They have to use 2 tyres. So they've used the hard, now they've used the medium, gone back to the hard tyre, so they can go all the way potentially to the end of this race on that tyre. Now that's a big ask, 58 lap race, so they've got 53 laps to do on a hard tyre. It's not out of the question. If you're starting this race last, you might as well take a big gamble.
Aston Martin certainly have absolutely nothing to lose, do they, Mark?
No, they don't, and that's exactly why they'll have gone for that, because they've got nothing to lose. It's also a quite low deg tyre. That hard tyre seems to have longevity in it, which means it might get to the end. The only concern around that, or the issue might be that could make this come unstuck, is that the fact that we've got a safety car here, we'll probably have more safety cars as this race goes out, which will give others the opportunity to make pit stops as the race goes on too. So they had to roll the dice. That's what they've done. Let's see how it plays out for them.
We're currently on lap 5 of 58. The race has been neutralised under safety car. Leclerc leads from Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton is 3rd. George Russell is in 5th. And Lando Norris is currently in 6th. Home hero Daniel Ricciardo is in 7th. Jenny.
Harry Benjamin, is this a mistake from Ferrari, do you think? We saw a mistake yesterday in the fact that they couldn't get the starter to work when it came to Carlos Sainz. So he qualified very poorly, started in P9. Is it a mistake that they put him on that hard? Have they cost him here the chance of maybe a 3rd or 4th place finish?
Oh, well, that's a hard question.
Come on, it's your first BBC Radio 5 Live F1 commentary. I wanted to put you right on there.
Quite possibly. Now, history dictates Ferrari don't always make the best decisions when it comes to race strategy. Perhaps they openly admit that. They've said this year they've got to get on top of that. You can see just from the replays that we're watching, Sainz had nothing on the start on those harder tyres. Absolutely nothing. He plummeted to near on the back of the grid as the safety car gets ready to come in this lap. But also, it looked like a bit of human error from Carlos Sainz as well. It was a risky move going around into turn 9. Mix of both, it certainly didn't help him going on those harder tyres. Not the wisest decision for Ferrari, but then again, they've got to split their strategies.
I think that's the point. They had to split the strategies, and actually, the mistake clearly is a mistake that Carlos has found himself in the gravel. But had he managed to get a decent start, and he didn't, but had he managed to, he would be on a different strategy, enabling him to go much longer into the Grand Prix, which might have opened up something for them. They had to roll the dice, a little bit like we talked about with Aston Martin. They had to do something different. It hasn't worked out. His start was so bad, it almost looked like it went into anti-stall.
Now the safety car is in this lap, and actually, Mark, we've got some new safety car regulations as well. Verstappen is behind Leclerc in 2nd. We're used to seeing Max Verstappen really hound the car in front of him, almost getting side by side, but he's not allowed to do that anymore.
No, he definitely isn't. You may remember back in Abu Dhabi at the end of last season, amongst all the other controversies, one of the things that came under question was Max running right alongside the car in front. That's been clamped down on this time out. Let's hear from Max.
So just a reminder, once Leclerc does let the safety car pull ahead, we have got the new rules of engagement, so make sure you can be to the side but not in front of his rear wing.
Max Verstappen's race engineer, GP Lambiase, just giving him a gentle reminder not to get too close to Leclerc, although Verstappen was certainly trying it on. But it is Ferrari of Leclerc leading Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Lewis Hamilton skulking behind in third, ready to pounce on any mistakes they might make. They come out of the penultimate corner. I think Leclerc has put his foot to the floor. He is gone. The safety car is in, rounding the final corner. Leclerc finding his way down the main straight. He moves over to the right-hand side, then back to the left. But I think he's outdone Verstappen there. Into turn one, on the brakes, the Scarlet Ferrari leads ahead of the Red Bull of Verstappen. Hamilton in third, no major moves being done into turn one.
Yeah, good restart from Charles Leclerc, but Max is right behind him. No DRS, of course, 2 laps after the safety car, so they won't be able to use that to their advantage in that Red Bull, but they have got a slippery car through the air. Very high speed, low drag. Can he put that into effect? Can he get tucked in underneath the rear wing of that Ferrari and along one of these straights on a circuit that's been notoriously difficult to overtake, but with changes this year, can he put that into effect and get past?
Lap 7 of 58 of the Australian Grand Prix, racing back in Melbourne for the first time in 3 years. We turned up 2 years ago, but were told to go home, and a global pandemic ensued. Now, Formula One is back with this new regulation of cars as well. Charles Leclerc leads, the leader of the championship, leads the reigning champion, Max Verstappen, who is falling back behind the Ferrari at the moment. That gap is nearly opening up to 0.8 of a second. I think he's clawed a little bit back as they make their way through turn 11 and round back again to start another lap. Lewis Hamilton not able seemingly to keep pace in that Mercedes with Max Verstappen, but crucially he's holding back the other Red Bull of Sergio Perez, who currently forms the underside of a sandwich, of a Red Bull sandwich with Hamilton in the middle. Then it's Russell in 5th, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo still line and stern in 6th and 7th. Esteban Ocon is 8th, Pierre Gasly is 9th. Interestingly, Fernando Alonso started 10th, still in 10th, but he is on the harder tyre. But he looked like he could have really gone, certainly for a top 3 in qualifying yesterday. We're yet to see the full pace, I think, of Alonso. He might be playing the long game here.
Yeah, he's got some definite pace in that car this weekend, so we'll keep an eye on him. But out front, it's still Leclerc from Verstappen. One of the challenges that Red Bull have had with their car, particularly in the hands of Verstappen, was tyre warm-up, and especially on the medium tyre during the practice sessions. Getting that up to temperature has always been a problem for them, more so than on the Ferrari. So this phase of the Grand Prix, after a couple of laps behind the safety car, that's what Max Verstappen's going to be dealing with. As we get the tyres up to temperature, which will be happening around now, perhaps we'll start to see Verstappen get the full pace out of that Red Bull and come back at Charles.
Coming into this, we said it was 2v1 with the Red Bulls with 2 cars in it and Leclerc, the lone wolf up front. Hamilton is doing a massive favour for Leclerc and Ferrari at the moment, just by being in the way and not getting Perez through into that 3rd place spot. This is a delight for Ferrari to watch right now.
It really is. They've made it a 1v1, and Hamilton, though, having to look in his rear mirrors a lot. Perez is all over the back of him for 3rd. Crucially up front, though, that gap is slowly opening to nearly a second. DRS is very powerful this year. The drag reduction system, that they are able to open a little slot in their rear wing once they get to within a second, but only at certain points on this track. There are 3 points on this track. It seems like Leclerc is trying to open the gap so Verstappen won't be able to get DRS mark, and he has, because the gap is now 1.2 seconds, so Verstappen not in DRS range.
Yeah, Leclerc pushing very, very hard, setting fastest sectors all the way around the lap on that previous one. We're going to get DRS activated next time around, but is Max going to be close enough to make it come into effect? I don't think so as things stand. 1.3 seconds now, the gap between Leclerc and Verstappen, so it's opening up further and further. Lewis Hamilton further 4 seconds back from Max Verstappen, with Perez tucked underneath the rear wing of the Mercedes, desperate to get past.
Okay, Lando, we're thinking plan A, target +5 at least. Confirm. Okay, for now.
Plan A for Lando Norris. So are we thinking that's a traditional one-stop strategy as Sergio Perez into turn 11 forces Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes in front of him to go really defensive on the right-hand side. Perez still behind Hamilton, but he's going to get DRS along the main straight.
Yeah, he is. He's right up underneath the rear wing of the Mercedes. What we're seeing now for the very first time this weekend is what are the effects of the changes to the circuit this weekend. They were all designed to make racing better, to enable more overtaking. We're not seeing it yet. We're about to get DRS, and here comes Sergio Perez. He can't do it into turn one. Climbs right up behind Lewis Hamilton, but not enough to get past.
He'll get another go, though, because they come through turn one into turn two, and the second DRS zone. Hamilton forcing Perez to the far right, down the inside, though. Perez undeterred. The Mexican in the Red Bull dives down the inside of Lewis Hamilton and gets in front of him. Perez moves himself up into third place. Lewis Hamilton losing a spot, but he fought hard for that one.
Yeah, he did, and that was exactly what Red Bull needed. Now it's Verstappen with Perez behind him, albeit with a 4 or 5 second gap, but he's cleared the Lewis Hamilton Mercedes, which is just a clear sign of the pace differential between those two cars. Not a lot Lewis could do there, but there you go. DRS opening up and allowing an overtaking opportunity. We haven't been able to say that very often around this Albert Park circuit before.
Not at all. Brilliant to see. So that was coming down into turn 3, which has been widened. It has been reprofiled for those purposes as well. Back out on track. It is lap 10 of 58 of the Australian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is your leader. He's also currently leading the World Championship. He's ahead of the reigning champion Max Verstappen, the Dutchman in the Red Bull, who is now joined by his teammate Sergio Perez in third. Behind them is the two British drivers for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton leads George Russell, and that's the top 5. Meanwhile, 4-time world champ Sebastian Vettel is finding the gravel further back, but he's not currently racing for too competitive a position. He does carry on through the gravel and on his way. Then it's Norris, Ricciardo 6th and 7th, Ocon, Gasly, Alonso the top 10, Tsunoda, Bottas, Schumacher, Zhou, Magnussen the top 15, Latifi, Albon, Stroll and Vettel now last of the runners. Carlos Sainz out of this race early doors. Jenny.
Hamilton's got an absolute train building behind him. It's Russell, then Norris, and then Ricciardo, all want past him. Hamilton just doesn't seem to have the pace of any of those three right now. What a change of form for McLaren.
As we hear the sounds of the green Aston Martin with Sebastian Vettel on board.
Yeah, sorry about that. So difficult to adjust that car under braking.
Vettel apologising for his little off. That was through turn 11, so just didn't get it turned in.
It's been a familiar sight, hasn't it, seeing an Aston Martin in the gravel this weekend, so I'm pleased to see he kept it out of the wall. That would have been a heart-stopping moment for his team and his mechanics back in the garage that have been very busy this weekend. Out front is still Leclerc, though, with a 2.3 second gap over Verstappen. He's built enough of a gap to break that DRS opportunity. 3 seconds now the gap, so still pushing hard. Verstappen, though, with some decent pace. The tyres have come into temperature now. He's starting to just wind it up a little bit. Some fastest mini seconds in the second half of the lap. And Perez back in third, but 7.4 seconds back from his teammate as things stand.
Just having a look at strategy. So we heard Norris going target +5 at least. These medium tyres seem to be holding on a little bit longer than they expected. The expected pit stop window started at lap 17. So now we're looking at Norris not coming in until maybe lap 22.
Yeah, temperature is considerably higher, 4 or 5, 6 degrees higher than it was over the practice sessions this weekend, so that will make a difference.
My left front is completely grey.
Okay, copy.
So this is what we were talking about with Max Verstappen, particularly on the medium. He suffered with this yesterday, graining, where you push the tyre too hard in the early phase of the race, particularly after a safety car like that, and the surface temperature just ramps up way too quickly, and then the top surface just rubs away, rolls away, a bit like when you drag a pencil eraser across a desk at school. Those little baubles coming off, and that loses your grip, it overheats it even more, and the problem gets worse, and that's another lock-up we've just seen from Max Verstappen, just highlighting that problem.
Coming into the penultimate corner for Verstappen. Yeah, it's been an up and down weekend for the Dutchman. He's not been happy with his balance all weekend long, and in fact, as that gap extends up at the front, 4.2 seconds between the leader Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. Last time around, Leclerc was 1.2 seconds quicker. That Ferrari has got so much pace on board right now. The closest battle's out on track. It looks like it's going to be between the two Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton currently leading the charge for 4th place. He's being joined by George Russell Russell and Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, who's being cheered on by the full house of Australian fans. His first Australian Grand Prix since 2019. Well, it's the same for all of them, really. But his first home Grand Prix, hasn't been home in a long while. So Ricciardo back on track and looking fairly competitive from the two McLarens as well. The sound you're hearing is Mick Schumacher, who just runs a little bit wide on the exit of turn 10, loses the spot to his teammate, kicks up a bit of gravel but carries on. Jenny.
Yeah, just worth pointing out, Max Verstappen had issues this morning with his hydraulic system. They've replaced a few parts, but still not 100% happy with that car when it went to the grid. They were working on it then. So fingers crossed for him that the hydraulics last, but he's certainly struggling out in that Red Bull. Said yesterday, not felt comfortable the entire weekend. Hoped it would get better in the race, but so far, with a 5-second gap to the leader, Charles Leclerc, not seeing that, are we?
5 seconds now, nearly the gap indeed. 5.1 seconds the gap to Leclerc, as the next battle that's brewing is currently the battle for 9th place. That battle for 4th has settled down a little bit between the Mercedes and the McLarens, but Pierre Gasly is being hunted down by Fernando Alonso in the blue and pink Alpine car, and the white and blue AlphaTauri currently leading. This is the Australian Grand Prix on BBC Radio 5 Live. It is a huge weekend of sport. We've got Premier League football coverage getting underway later this afternoon. It's Manchester versus Liverpool from 4:30. Ian Dennis and Peter Schmeichel will be here to take you through the coverage of that. And the 4th and final day of the Masters from Augusta gets going from 8 o'clock. Mark Chapman leaves the coverage as well. Scotty Scheffler currently leading the way. Back on track at the Australian Grand Prix though, and the battle further back. It's Valtteri Bottas fighting with Yuki Tsunoda. He tries a move down the inside, doesn't quite work, locks up his front right, has to bail out of it. Tsunoda holds that one for the moment in 11th. Back in the pit lane, Nicholas Latifi comes in, a 3.2 second stop. He's just switched on to the hard compound tyre and is currently running last now. Valtteri
Bottas came incredibly close there to sliding straight into the back of Yuki Tsunoda's car. Unbelievably close. A big lock-up under braking. He was out of control and just managed to avoid the rear wing of that AlphaTauri. Out in front, we've got a really interesting battle here. Charles Leclerc on his own in the only Ferrari left in this Grand Prix. Nearly 6 seconds behind him is Max Verstappen. Now, these are two cars that have been delivering almost identical lap times all weekend, and yet doing it in very different ways. And was always going to have the question about how was that going to play out during the race? Was one going to be able to look after tyres better than the other? So far, in the early phase of this race, and we're on lap 14 of 58, it looks like the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc has managed to break enough of a gap to prevent Max Verstappen staying close enough and benefiting from the 3 DRS zones around this circuit.
That's Mark Priestley, former chief F1 mechanic for the McLaren Formula 1 team, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin and Jenny Gow, as Mick Schumacher exits the pits after swapping to the harder compound tyre.
Yeah, it's getting to be that little window, isn't it, where people come in, Leclerc Radio?
And we are going plan A plus 5.
No, they're copying Norris going plan A plus 5. That's just cheeky copying McLaren, but not a bad plan. Yeah, just to finish on the pit stops at the moment, Latifi's come in. He's gone medium to hard, and then you just saw that Mick Schumacher has also come in. So definitely a possibility as Carlos Sainz, poor him, sits on the pit wall, takes no further part in this, and the Ferrari team have a little debrief with him.
And I think that is the first race. This will be the first race that Carlos Sainz has not scored points in since last season as well. So it's been a long run of points, consecutive finishes for Carlos Sainz. That ends today. He is currently the only driver out of this race after spinning off coming through turns 9 and 10 and getting stuck in the gravel. That was all before lap 3. That brought out the virtual safety car. Then it brought out the safety car. That bunched up the field. It's now lap 16. Charles Leclerc was the pole sitter. He got away well. He's still leading. It's 7 seconds the gap from reigning champion Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. Lewis Hamilton 4th, George Russell 6th, and George Russell 5th, and Lando Norris in 6th. Meanwhile, on the main straight, though, it is Valtteri Bottas, the former Mercedes driver, now in the Alfa Romeo, who makes a move down the outside of turn 1 on Yuki Tsunoda. He's got up to 11th, Tsunoda down to 12th. That was a great move, aided by DRS. Forced Tsunoda down the inside, swept around the outside, Mark.
Yeah, he did. Another example of overtaking at Albert Park. Again, something we haven't been able to say very frequently in the past. So early signs, it's not dramatically transformed this circuit into one where overtaking's easy, but it is clearly possible.
Tsunoda looks like he's struggling here with this medium compound tyre, because Magnussen on the hard is now all over the back of him. So we really are getting that crossover now, it seems, Jenny.
Yeah, and if you look at Lewis Hamilton, he was under attack a little bit from his own teammate George Russell a few laps ago, but now we know Hamilton is an absolute master at looking after his tyres, of nursing them around, and it can make a huge difference. Let's see what some of these drivers can do.
And just as you say that, Jenny, Kevin Magnussen, who was really gaining ground on Yuki Tsunoda, does a little bit of what Carlos Sainz did at the start of this race. Too hot into the left-hander of turn 9, skirts across the grass, bails out of it, but unlike Sainz, he manages to keep it pointed in all 4 wheels in the right direction, but he has lost a few spots from that, so he's lost only 1 spot, actually. Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo made it through.
I think what happened is he got so tucked up underneath the rear wing. Let's see if
Okay, Kev.
Yeah, my bad, sorry.
That was Kevin Magnussen talking to his engineer there, but he got so tucked up underneath the rear wing that I would imagine he lost a lot of that downforce from the front of that car, and then just couldn't get it stopped and turned into turn 9 and ended up running wide on the grass. Interestingly, we've seen 2 drivers now, Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, hear from their engineers that they're going to go +5 on their target pit stop lap. That's a good sign that we're getting less degradation than anyone expected on these tyres in these conditions, slightly warmer conditions. So +5 laps from target means that their pre-race target strategy was to stop on a certain lap. The degradation is less, so that they can now go at least another 5 laps without running into tyre problems.
Quite interesting though, we've already heard from Verstappen saying he's suffering from graining on his front left. That was around lap 12. We've done another 5 laps. Graining can kind of clear itself up if you drive the car in the right way. But I just find it fascinating that he's struggling out there on the tyres, and others are actually saying, no, this is working for me, let's keep going. So it's quite driver specific, it's quite car specific, and also position specific.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the problems and challenges that Red Bull particularly have had, is looking after tyres. They've gone for a lower downforce setup, which does give them an increased top speed down the straights, but it makes it harder to look after the tyres. There's essentially less grip, and so Verstappen really suffering with some of that already.
Of course, what has helped some of these runners out is that we did run 4 laps behind the safety car. That would have allowed them to save a little bit of tyre, but the pit stops coming thick and fast. Esteban Ocon now into the pit lane, the Frenchman in his blue and pink Alpine livery car. Nice, smooth, nearly smooth stop, a little bit slow on the rear left it seemed, but he's out and away. 4-second stop time. It's not too bad, especially with these new bigger tyres. It's taking a little bit longer to get back to those sub 2-second nearly stops we were seeing. Leclerc currently out in front, 8.6-second lead over Verstappen, Jenny.
Yeah, those sub 2-second pit stops seem like a long time ago now. McLaren actually had one of the worst records in pit stops with reliability wise. They kept having issues. Now they've gone up to the best of the pit stops at 2.3, so that's what they're really aiming for, a 4-second pit stop from Alpine there, a little bit slow.
Now out front, Leclerc building a substantial gap, nearly 9 seconds, which is crucial for race strategy because it's going to open up a number of options for him. He's well out of range of any undercut from Max Verstappen. As we hear Max Verstappen's team radio burst into life and his engineer calls him in for a pit stop. So with those tyre troubles, here comes Max into the pits now.
Lap 19, the reigning champion is in, approaching his mechanics. Let's hope for a nice stop. Perez goes through, Hamilton goes through, and Russell goes through on track as well. He takes off the yellow medium walled compound tyres and puts on
a hard tyre.
A hard tyre.
Was the only
I nearly thought I saw a flash of red, and I thought, no, surely not.
It's the insert of the tyre. Now that they've got those tyre covers, it's really hard to read it from a distance. So you did a good job, but he's onto the hard tyre. And just worth pointing out, George Russell's been told now's the time, if you've got extra pace, use it.
Jenny, yeah, just cutting in there because we've got to move back on track into the new turn 3. It's the Alpine making its way through. That's Fernando Alonso coming through on Pierre Gasly, and that's a fight for, where is that? That's further down the field, isn't it, at the moment? No, it's not. It's for P8 right now. So Alonso currently in for P8 ahead of Gasly. So Alonso's hard tyres coming into form for him right now. He's yet to pit.
Now Max Verstappen, having made that pit stop, almost forced into it, I would imagine, by the tyre troubles he was suffering. This isn't some gamble to try and overcome Leclerc at this point. He's too far back, and crucially they're going to struggle with warm-up now. He's on the harder tyre, which is more difficult to warm up anyway. He's just come out the pits. He's going to really struggle. He's not going to make any inroads, which means that from Charles Leclerc's point of view, he doesn't necessarily have to respond. This is no real threat to the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. He's out front with a big enough gap. He can kind of do what he wants.
And the sound you just heard as well was riding on board with Fernando Alonso as he made that overtaking move for 8th and very nearly clipping his front left onto the rear right of Pierre Gasly, just avoiding it as he dived down the inside. I'll tell you what though, Lewis Hamilton has come alive in his Mercedes. Of course, he is right up behind Sergio Perez in the battle for second with DRS. He gets close under braking for turn 3. The Silver Arrow versus the Red Bull. He has to bail out of it on that occasion. The Mexican holds firm in second, but this is going to be a battle of tyre degradation. Now, Perez, we've seen it in the past, is an absolute ace when it comes to getting the most out of his tyres, but Lewis Hamilton is doing so as well. Jenny.
We saw fantastic battles between them last year, didn't we, when it was a case of these two blocking each other or trying to attack each other, and they're doing it once again, and Perez is just such a master of this. It's beautiful to watch.
But the Red Bull definitely suffering. Perez, of course, not having made a pit stop yet. And Lewis Hamilton looking like he's got more performance left in that tyre than the Red Bull has. We've already seen Max have to make a pit stop because he started to lose performance. Looks like Sergio Perez potentially suffering a similar fate. Are they going to bring him in too?
Lap 20 of 58. Charles Leclerc is currently leading in the Ferrari. He is on the medium compound tyre. Daniel Ricciardo?
Lando will pit this lap. Verstappen is 4.5 seconds behind on new tyres, so we want maximum pace as soon as Lando's out your way.
Okay, so Ricciardo's engineer saying that Lando's going to pit this lap. Sergio Perez has just come into the pits as well. That releases the two Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, who follow through.
And this is not playing out well for Red Bull. This is not how they hoped this race would go. They would have hoped to be able to cling on to the coattails of Charles Leclerc, make use of DRS, but it hasn't worked out that way. That Ferrari just seemingly better in race conditions, looking after its tyres, still out in front, a 17-second gap right now between Leclerc and the next man, Lewis Hamilton, neither of them having made a pit stop yet. So no major threat to the Ferrari at this point. Barring any major dramas and difficulties, he seems to have this race completely under control right now.
As Lando Norris comes out of the pits on slightly colder tyres, having to defend a little bit from the Williams behind him, but he makes that move stick, and the Williams all over the back of him at the moment. That's Alex Albon, who started plumb last. Jenny.
Charles Leclerc just been told in the Ferrari out in the lead, we're going to plan B. So a change of plan for Ferrari. They've seen the woes of other people around them, but when this medium tyre drops, my word, it just goes off. Perez lost a second in one lap there, just from that tyre looking old and stinky and having Hamilton pressure from behind.
Mark, is it purely down to the tyres right now that we're seeing these huge gaps develop, actually, especially at the front, because these are the biggest gaps we've seen all season? Is it track specific, as Daniel Ricciardo just gets told to come into the pits in his McLaren?
Well, I think particularly at the front end, as I said, with the Red Bulls, they are really struggling. They've gone for a low downforce setup, which has such an impact on how you're able to generate tyre temperature and maintain tyre temperature. And that, as we've talked about many times over the weekend, is so crucial to the outcome of your race. Daniel Ricciardo with a nice slick pit stop from McLaren, 2.4 seconds, as Jenny was saying. Real great work from the guys and girls in orange down there.
Yeah, the order is a little mixed up at the moment with waiting for the pit stops to work their way out. Daniel Ricciardo comes out behind his teammate and only just in front of Alex Albon and Lance Stroll. They're going to go nearly 3 wide. Lance Stroll has DRS, so does Alex Albon. It's 3 wide with the McLaren down the inside. Ricciardo holding firm. Stroll has to back out of it. Albon goes late into the brakes of turn 3, keeps it turned in, but he loses out that spot to Stroll. Nice little fight there. Sebastian Vettel and the other Aston wants to join the party. Charles Leclerc, our race leader, is coming into the pits.
That was really unlucky for the Williams. He just came round turn 1 with the McLaren exiting the pit lane right in front of him, and he's actually lost out with 2 positions there, and he's got another Aston Martin right behind him. Here comes the race leader into the pits now with the Ferrari team bursting into action. It looked like a nice clean stop from Charles Leclerc, 2.7 seconds on the clock. All he needed was no dramas. He's got plenty of time behind him. He exits the pit lane now onto a nice clear track in front of him, and his race is back underway now on the hard tyre. 23 laps out of 58 gone.
Charles Leclerc through, George Russell behind him as well, really closing down that gap as Lewis Hamilton exits his pit stop. 2.8 seconds for the 7-time world champion. He gets out into a bit of clear air and is crucially with a decent sized gap ahead of the Red Bull of Sergio Perez as Max Verstappen sets the new fastest lap.
And that is crucial that Lewis Hamilton has exited the pits ahead of Sergio Perez, and that only happened because when Perez pitted, Lewis still had enough performance performance left in that tyre to essentially overcut the Red Bull. He managed to keep that performance up with one more lap whilst the Red Bull was in the pit lane, and that has catapulted him ahead of that Red Bull car. Now Perez, though, right tucked up with tyres well up to temperature as opposed to Lewis's cold, hard tyres. Now the Red Bull right underneath the rear wing of Lewis Hamilton.
The warm-up is bad on this tyre. Just do what you can.
And here we go, Sergio Perez with that warm tyre around the outside of the long sweeping section that used to have a chicane in it. Into turn 9 he goes, now ahead of the Mercedes, making use of that tyre temperature that he has, and Lewis Hamilton doesn't.
Smooth move from Perez, gets it done just before a safety car has been called out onto the track. Sebastian Vettel is plummeting down the timing screen and he's stopped on track. Jenny.
Yeah, George Russell just pitted, so I don't know if he managed to take the most of that safety car or not, but he may well have managed to just sneak in there and make the most of that. Let's see what happens with Russell, but that could be fortuitous potentially for a few of the drivers out there.
There is debris out on track as well, so although Vettel just seemingly has come to a stop, he might well have had a incident. We're still awaiting to see replays of that. George Russell comes out of the pits in third, ahead of Fernando Alonso on the hard tyre. So Alonso going long there. Leclerc is still out in the lead ahead of Max Verstappen. Russell, Alonso, Perez is 5th. Hamilton is 6th. Kevin Magnussen hasn't stopped. He's on 7th. And it's Norris, Ricciardo and Stroll the top 10. And there is a lot of debris out on track, which is why the safety car has been called. Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin, who has had a torrid weekend so far, has stopped out on track. We ride on board with the German champion now. He's behind the Williams, coming through turn 4, gets a bit too greedy on the throttle, that plus curb, and round he goes, front wing into the wall, and that is the end of Sebastian Vettel's Australian Grand Prix.
And that was it. That's another driver error, I've got to say, from Sebastian Vettel, a guy with so much experience, but he hit the throttle too hard whilst on the curbs. These cars, particularly in 2022, they don't like being on the curbs. We've got to see drivers, we've seen drivers being told to stay off them more and more. As he hit the curb, it lifted the rear wheels, he spun the rear wheels up, he pirouetted round and hit the barriers, and that is another mistake. This weekend has cost Aston Martin an absolute fortune. Bear in mind, we're in a budget-capped era. The amount of parts and damage they've had over the course of this weekend has been astronomical.
Yeah, the Aston Martin safety car leading everybody around at the moment. It might be the only time an Aston Martin leads the race for the whole of the season at this rate. It looks really bad for them. Leclerc leading from Verstappen, then Russell with that good pit stop timing in third. My question is, Alonso on the hard tyre. He started on that. Too early for him to come in, is it, to get to the end on a medium? So this safety car falls at just the wrong time for him.
I think it does, you know. However, I wouldn't discount more safety cars as this race goes on. So
come on, really?
He jinxed it now, haven't you?
L plan still might work then for Alonso.
Yeah, he's got pace in the car and he doesn't seem to be suffering. Still got pace in the car, which is crucial. What this has worked out nicely for, of course, is Max Verstappen, who now finds himself tucked up underneath the rear wing of that Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, and now on the hard tyre alongside Leclerc. Only a couple of laps in terms of tyre life between them. We'll just see the replay of Sergio Perez getting past Lewis Hamilton again. That managed to pull that move off just before that safety car was thrown, so that was very good and fortuitous timing for the Red Bull. But yeah, Max Verstappen now back in a straight fight with Charles Leclerc. Do the two cars perform differently on the harder tyre compared to the medium tyre? We haven't really seen the Red Bull on the harder tyre much over the course of this weekend. We saw him struggle on the medium tyre in practice. We don't quite know what they've got in terms of the hard.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. You're currently listening to live coverage of the Australian Grand Prix. 25 laps in. We are currently under safety car period. Our second safety car. The race has been neutralised because Sebastian Vettel's Aston Martin has crashed, but that car now being wheeled away behind the barriers. So hopefully it won't be too long before we get going again. Jenny Gow.
Yeah, and Sebastian Vettel's teammate Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin, he's not had a good weekend so far either. He's in 13th place now. The team just pitted him again, so his third pit stop of the afternoon. They've brought him in another set of the hard tyres. They've done a little adjustment to the front wing as well, so maybe they feel that actually they can do some sort of recovery race from here and score points, which if they can, that'll be a great performance for Stroll and Aston Martin.
Well, if they can rescue anything from this weekend, it will be a massive bonus, I have to say. Max Verstappen, 6 laps on his hard tyres. Charles Leclerc only 2 laps on his. But I don't think that's going to be a real differentiator. These tyres have got enough longevity in them to easily get to the end of this race. But crucially, in the laps before the safety car, when Max got those tyres up to temperature, he started putting in the fastest laps of the race. He currently holds that, the fastest lap of the race so far on that hard tyre. So when they both come out of this safety car period, who's going to come out best?
So George benefited from that safety car, so he's managed to box under it.
What does that mean? I've lost the position.
8th firm.
Keep getting unlucky with safety cars.
Yeah, exactly that, Lewis. Yeah, it's just bad luck.
Lewis Hamilton's race engineer Pete Podington just telling him what the situation is, why George Russell is now suddenly a little bit further up the road. He currently sits in 3rd. Does Russell, Hamilton's new young buck British teammate, Hamilton losing out under safety car and behind Perez in 6th right now, Jenny.
Yeah, this is quite interesting for Mercedes. They've always said they'll have parity between their 2 drivers regardless until it gets to a point that they're fighting for a championship. Looking at that, that means Russell gets privilege on track. Now, they should have done all of the stops that they need to. It was a one-stop race with safety cars coming in and out. And Russell absolutely lucked into that. He came in at the perfect moment to capitalise. So he comes out in 3rd. So it's kind of like the wrong driver, the other driver, could now be in position to potentially challenge for that podium. We know Alonso's still got to stop. He's just behind Russell in the Alpine. So this is going to be fantastic. And just a reminder, safety car rules have changed when it comes to where you can position your car on a restart. Max Verstappen is going to be one very frustrated driver in that Red Bull when I think the restart comes underway. It's not his preferred technique, is it?
No, it's not. And it's all going to be about tyre warm-up. We talked about it last time out. That was on the medium tyre. Now we're on the harder tyre, which has a different warm-up characteristic. It's actually harder to get... It's harder, and it's harder to get warmed up. But Max Verstappen will be hoping that, given that he's spent a few laps on them already, he's already been through a warm-up phase, he's already experimented with that, learned how best to do it, and got some fastest laps off the back of it. Can he do it again as the safety car comes in at the end of this lap?
That was Mark Priestley, former chief F1 mechanic for McLaren, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, Jenny Gow here as well. You're listening to live coverage of the 3rd round of the 2022 F1 World Championship from Melbourne in Albert Park. Currently under safety car, but that is coming to an end. It is lap 26. Charles Leclerc is leading in the Ferrari ahead of reigning champion Max Verstappen. George Russell is in 3rd. He's benefited massively from stopping under the safety car. Fernando Alonso in the Alpine, yet to pit, running long, has to stay running for as long as he can. He's in 4th ahead of Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton, who's one of the losers from this safety car period. He's down in 6th. Kevin Magnussen yet to stop. He's made his way up to 7th ahead of the 2 McLarens of Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo.
Holy cow, that was close. Yeah, understood.
Oh my, we've just seen a replay of listening to Mick Schumacher, who was just on the radio a few seconds ago, nearly running into the back of Yuki Tsunoda, getting a hammer on the main straight, and that was a little bit of misjudgment there, wasn't it?
That's going to be investigated. I'd be almost certain. Tsunoda, I don't think allowed to stop that aggressively. But here we go, back at the front. Charles Leclerc now leads the field through the final part of this lap. Max Verstappen tucks up right behind him as they come through the penultimate corner. At what point is Leclerc going to go?
He's gone straight out of the penultimate corner. He's leading already. Leclerc, though a little bit slow, off the final corner. That's going to allow Max Verstappen to really get under the rear wing of the Scarlet Red Ferrari. They go side by side. Leclerc is on the inside. Verstappen is on the outside. Can he hold it round? No, he has to get out of it for the time being, but he stays tucked up through turn 2 into the DRS zone, but they won't have DRS, not after a safety car restart. Verstappen trying to find a way through. Norris is making moves further back as well, but Leclerc holds firm right now in the lead. Russell wanted to get involved in that action as well, and the Mercedes on board with George Russell in 3rd. He's managed to make some ground up on Verstappen, but as things settle down coming through this middle sector of the Albert Park track, Leclerc pulling away now 6/10 ahead of Verstappen, and George Russell in 3rd, who's falling a little bit now back into the clutches of Fernando Alonso.
And that might well have been Max Verstappen's opportunity. That was all about tyre temperature. We saw at the last part of the lap lap, still as the safety car had just peeled into the pits. Leclerc had no tyre temperature at the final corner. He struggled, allowing Max to get so close, but he just couldn't pull it off. And now Leclerc just building temperature and pulled out a 0.8 of a second gap over Max Verstappen in seconds.
Sergio Perez getting in on this fight, as well as Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso under pressure here for fourth, actually, because Russell has detached himself ever so slightly, but there's nothing in it. Alonso now forming a little bit of a train. Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, the Danish driver, who of course on debut here in McLaren in 2014 got a podium in his first race. No one's done that since Lewis Hamilton himself. Magnussen looking at the inside of Hamilton, a little bit too far back on this occasion into turn one, has to hold firm. Kevin Magnussen, of course, going long. He has not stopped, so his tyres working well for him, but now he's under pressure from Lando Norris, who's right up behind him. He goes down the inside. Magnussen sees that one off and says no thank you. Magnussen 7th, Norris in 8th.
Yeah, and up front, we're really settling back into the similar sort of picture that we saw before the safety car, with Leclerc pulling out a substantial lead, 1.5 seconds now. So when we do get DRS activated next time around, that won't come into play for the front two as things stand.
Lap 28 of 58 at the Australian Grand Prix. We're coming up to nearly halfway point of this race. We lost Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari early doors. He span off through turn 10 into the gravel. A disastrous weekend, really, for the Spaniard in the Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel, the four-time world champion, has also been crashing left, right and centre this weekend. Unfortunately, he carried that through into the race as well. He is out. Those are the two runners we've lost. Charles Leclerc leads this race by 1.7 seconds. We have just had a safety car restart, so the field is a little bit more bunched up than it was. George Russell in the Mercedes is in third. Then there's a battle for fourth brewing for Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez. Hamilton is sixth, Kevin Magnussen 7th, Norris 8th, Ricciardo 9th, and Alex Albon, without stopping yet, has made his way up into the top 10 in the Williams. Then comes Ocon, Stroll, Bottas, Gasly, Tsunoda the top 15, Schumacher, Zhou, Latifi, currently the last of the runners in 18th. We are still waiting for pit stops from Fernando Alonso, from Kevin Magnussen and from Alex Albon. Jenny?
Yeah, just listening across to the radios, Pierre Gasly's been in touch with his team in AlphaTauri. He says he's got front wing damage, so maybe had a little clip with somebody at the restart of that, but he certainly doesn't sound too happy in that AlphaTauri. He's plummeted down the order. He is currently in P14.
You're hearing the sound on board the Red Bull approaching the new section that is being created so much faster in Albon Park. It's Sergio Perez currently chasing down Fernando Alonso through turn 9 and 10. The gravel to your left. This is BBC Radio 5 Live's coverage of Formula 1. It's a big weekend of sport ahead of us. Premier League football coming up a little later this afternoon. It's Manchester versus Liverpool from 4:30. Ian Dennis and Peter Schmeichel here to take you through the coverage. Then from 8 o'clock, it's the fourth and final day of the Masters from Augusta. Mark Chapman leads the coverage. Scotty Scheffler is leading the way at 9 under. Australian Cameron Smith is second. Leading Brit is Danny Willett in 8th. And I should say it's actually Manchester City, of course, versus Liverpool. Meanwhile, back on track in the Red Bull, Sergio Perez looking at the rear of the Alpine of Fernando Alonso, getting close under DRS into turn 1. What can he do now coming into the second DRS zone? He gets alongside the Spaniard of the Alpine. Perez late on the brakes, down into turn 3. Nice and smooth from the Mexican, who makes his way past Alonso up into 4th.
Yeah, nicely done from Sergio, and that's been set up from a long way back, further around the lap. Turn 3 seems to be the overtaking opportunity. It's the second section of DRS. Only one DRS detection point at the end of the lap, but 2 lots of DRS as a result of it. The first one down the start-finish straight, not quite long enough for most people to get the overtake done, but if you can stay close enough, and the second straight and into turn 3, that's where it's at. We've seen a couple of those moves being pulled off so far.
Lap 30, Leclerc leads, 2.7 seconds the gap to Verstappen. George Russell in third, Lewis Hamilton 6th. As we get another look at that brilliant move from Sergio Perez down the inside into turn 3, makes that move look easy, Jenny.
Yeah, just looking at Alonso's tyres, I wonder how long he can stay out for. He started on a hard tyre, which I think has a maximum life of around 40 laps. We're on lap 30, but I just wonder when he feels it's the right time to hit the go button, come in and change onto those medium tyres. He'd love to do it under another safety car, I'm sure.
I think he would, you know, and I think given that he's still got enough life left in them, he doesn't seem to be suffering too much, although he has just lost a place there to Lewis Hamilton.
He has. Hamilton getting DRS on the back of Alonso, makes it stick through turn 1, and then to cause even further damage, he gets DRS again and can extend that lead coming down into turn 3. The silver arrow through on the Alpine as the heat of the sun in Melbourne as we get towards late afternoon in Australia beats down as they make their way through the trees of Albert Park. Leafs offline and sparks flying as Lewis Hamilton makes his way through on Alonso. So yes, Alonso still running on those older tyres though, so I have a feeling he'll need to come in sooner rather than later, but he's now got a little bit of a gap because Kevin Magnussen behind him in the Haas for 7th also hasn't pitted, so it's sort of even playing field there.
It's your worst.
Come on, Kev, these are really good laps.
Really good laps for Kevin Magnussen. His engineer tells him he's hunting down Alonso. He's been given the spark for it.
Well, I was just going to say, it's your worst nightmare as a team strategist from a Fernando Alonso perspective right now, where you're starting to get the drop-off from your tyre, you're starting to lose performance, but you know that if a safety car comes out, and there's a high chance of it around this circuit, if that safety car happens, that can save you so much time. And so it's when do you pull the trigger, and when does it cost you too much to stay out on track?
Start lap 32. Charles Leclerc has just set the fastest lap time currently. The fastest lap time of the original circuit was a 1:24. So these faster cars, faster circuit already proving that true. Magnussen now under pressure from Lando Norris, who has DRS into turn 3. Doesn't make it work that time around though. Has to settle behind the Danish driver for now. Jenny.
Yeah, just listening across to Charles Leclerc, and he's being told by his Ferrari team that Verstappen's doing tyre saving at turns 5, 10 and 12. So there is a little bit more that Verstappen could give, but that Red Bull just being greedy on its tyres way more than the Ferrari.
Yeah, it is. 3.5 seconds is the gap behind Charles Leclerc to Max Verstappen. It's not insurmountable, and we've seen things like safety cars come into play, really shake up the order. It's not insurmountable, and it'll be towards the end of this race where we see one of those two cars potentially having drop-off before the other. Potentially there, a differential in performance, but my feeling is that given what we've seen so far this weekend, that drop-off will come on the Red Bull before it might come on the Ferrari.
Charles Leclerc currently the fastest and going faster as well, half a second quicker on that last lap around. Just set another fastest lap time compared to Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez is also the 3rd fastest driver out on track at the moment as he gets tucked up behind George Russell, gets closer under DRS into turn 1. He's going to be really close in the run down to turn 3, as is Lando Norris on the back of Kevin Magnussen once more coming through turn 1. The sound you're hearing is on board with the British driver, the McLaren racer, who looks to the outside down into turn 3 on the Haas driver. Kevin Magnussen having to go defensive, forces Norris out wide. Norris has to tuck back in behind him. That allows Daniel Ricciardo to get a little bit closer, but still the fight goes on for 7th place. Magnussen currently holding off Lando Norris. Ricciardo 9th, Alex Albon still holding firm in 10th.
Yeah, the McLaren definitely quicker in this phase of the race, but that was good defensive, clean driving from Kevin Magnussen, positioning his car in exactly the one spot you can't get past in turn 3. And as they come through the really fast, sweeping turns between turns 8 and 9, the McLaren closes up into turn 9, but not enough. Through turn 10 they go, and it'll be turn 11 might be the next opportunity. Can he get close enough under the big braking zone of turn 11 with DRS open? Not quite.
4.4 seconds, the gap now out front. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari leads Max Verstappen. George Russell is 3rd, Perez 4th, Hamilton 5th, Alonso 6th, and then comes this battle though as the Haas of Kevin Magnussen runs a little bit deep coming into the penultimate corner. That has put Lando Norris all over the back of him. He's closer than he's been so far on the main straight. He dives to the right alongside with DRS and gets in front of the Danish driver before they get into the braking zone of turn 1. Norris through for 7th on Magnussen. Ricciardo now wants a piece of this. He wants to follow his teammate through as soon as possible. The Aussie driver on home soil, buoyed by the crowd support this weekend, drags it down into turn 3. Can't get close enough, has to settle and hold 9th for now. But Magnussen losing a spot there to Lando Norris, 7th and 8th.
He's in exactly the same boat here as Fernando Alonso. He's got a little bit of pace, but it's starting to drop away. He needs a tyre stop. Does he hang on? How long does he hang on in the hope of a safety car?
Yeah, he just had a lock-up actually on the way into the last couple of turns, and it was really costly for him. Couldn't get the car turned in, and that was painful.
Jenny Gow there alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Mark Priestley too joins me, former chief F1 mechanic of McLaren. You're listening to BBC Radio 5 Live's coverage of the Australian Grand Prix. It's the third round of the Formula One World Championship. Charles Leclerc leads ahead of Max Verstappen and George Russell. Do feel free to get in touch should you so wish. The hashtag BBC F1. We've had quite a lot of people get in touch already as we see Sergio Perez off board with him on the main straight, closing up under DRS to George Russell, getting ever closer, but Mark, with 35 laps in now, we've seen a few overtakes. The racing has been exciting, but has it been enough considering all the changes?
It's not been dramatically different, has it? We have seen overtaking opportunities, we've seen overtaking happen, but it's all been under DRS so far. Perhaps that's what we might expect in the modern era of Formula One, but look, this is a circuit that was becoming outdated for modern Formula One cars. The tweaks and changes they've made have been to try and bring it into the modern era, to cope with the size and weight of these particular Formula One cars that we've got in 2022. It seems like a step in the right direction. It's not huge, but look, we've had overtakes, and that's, I guess, what everyone's looking for. The next one we expect, or we're hoping might happen, is going to be Sergio Perez on George Russell, getting ever closer, looking for that all-important third position.
Daniel Ricciardo is the sound you're hearing on board with him, making a move past Kevin Magnussen down on the main straight. DRS aided, late on the brakes into turn one. Ricciardo through on Magnussen for 8th now as Kevin Magnussen starts to plummet, his tyres running out of life. Fernando Alonso, who is also still holding on to his tyres, the harder compound he's on. He started that race on the harder tyre. He's in 6th.
To George, important. Management is more important than position. If you're hurting the tyres to keep Perez behind, you can let him by.
That is not what you want to hear, and it's certainly not what George Russell wants to hear. Saying, well, he could just warrant that place and give it up if he's really struggling with these tyres, but he doesn't want to do that. They're racing, Jenny.
Well, I've just been listening to Lewis Hamilton's radio, and he's basically saying, are the guys in front pulling away from me? Yes, they are, but Hamilton is saving his tyres. The team think that the rest of the field will come back to him towards the end of this because he'll just have more rubber, more tyre usage left. So Russell isn't as experienced as Hamilton. Is he playing the short game here where he should be concentrating on the long game? That's certainly what the team implies with that radio message.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, isn't it? And it's exactly what Sergio Perez will be hoping, because he's definitely being held up by the Mercedes of George Russell as things stand, and that will be costing both of them time and tyre life. When you're fighting like this, it hurts your tyres much more than if you're running in clear air. Here he goes, though. Sergio Perez, DRS wide open, and around the outside, Sergio Perez goes, and that takes him up into 3rd place. George Russell perhaps listening to his team and just looking after those tyres as the race goes on.
Well, you say listening to his team, Mark, but he hasn't exactly pulled out the way to let him through, has he? He had another look down the inside into turn 13. He's going to be right on the back of him and gets DRS once again down the main straight, but it looks like that Red Bull just has the superior straight line speed into the braking zone of turn 1 under the sun of Melbourne and Albert Park. Through the trees they go down to turn 3. The Red Bull now in front of the Mercedes of George Russell, and just 3 seconds give or take now between Russell and Lewis Hamilton in 5th.
Yeah, the 2 Red Bulls are now lying line astern in 2nd and 3rd, but with a substantial gap, around 5 seconds up the road to the lead car, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. It feels to me like it's Charles Leclerc just managing his tyres, and he's probably got more in hand if he ever needed it, if Max Verstappen were to come back. So we're coming into the final third, I guess, towards the final third of this Grand Prix. If anything's going to happen for Red Bull, it's going to have to be centred around tyre drop-off, hoping the the Ferrari will drop off quicker than them.
So it's taken 37 laps for Red Bull to get back to the position that they started this race in. You've got to look at this maybe as we get towards the end of the season and say, how costly could this race have been to their championship challenge? Let's wait and see. We've got a very long way to go, and obviously Sainz isn't in this race now, just Ferrari's Leclerc. But my word, it's taken a long time to get back.
Yeah, perhaps not as costly as Bahrain was, with no points, but certainly it helps them that Sainz also not scoring valuable points for the team either. Verstappen second, Sergio Perez currently in third. Let's take you through where the Brits are at the moment. George Russell is in fourth, leading his teammate Lewis Hamilton in fifth. But George Russell, benefiting from an earlier safety car period, managed to get his stop while the field was neutralised. But he's struggling with his tyres. We think Lewis Hamilton might be just saving a little bit something extra for the end. Further back, Lando Norris leads his teammate Daniel Ricciardo for seventh. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin fighting with Valtteri Bottas, but they're out of the points. They're currently fighting for 12th. And actually, worth maybe just pointing out, on my screen it says Stroll has pitted 3 times.
Yeah, he has. He came in again to pit under the safety car. They did that front wing adjust, so they wanted to try and give him a sort of more attacking style car. Also worth pointing out that some of the drivers haven't stopped yet. Those that started on hards, Alonso, Magnussen and Albon are the front runners, and those are the ones hoping for a safety car right now so they can pit for a cheap stop.
Yeah, that hope is going to gradually run out. We're at 38 laps, as Jenny mentioned earlier on. The hard tyre that everybody's on right now, predicted to have a usable life of around 40 laps. That period is clearly coming to an end, so they will be forced into a pit stop if a safety car doesn't come, probably within the next 4 or 5 laps, I would say.
Esteban Ocon in the Alpine has just been told he needs to start to lift and coast. They see a problem on that Alpine. We said reliability has been an issue for them, but he can't lift and coast because he's in an absolute train and a battle with Lance Stroll right behind him in the Aston Martin. So he's currently in P11.
Jenny, as you say that, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, the reigning champion who was second in this race, has pulled off the road.
Okay, Max, stop the car, please.
Being told by his engineer to stop the car. That looks like it's on the exit of turn 1. A little bit of smoke coming from the front, but that just like looks like it's heat coming from the tyres. Max Verstappen getting out of his car. The crowd can't believe it. Hands on their heads. A virtual safety car is deployed.
They had hydraulics issues coming into the race. They had hydraulics issues on the grid. I wonder if this is a problem for Max Verstappen that's crept back in.
Yeah, that's the worst nightmare, of course, for the team. When they were sitting not with any major threat to the lead car, the lead Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, but still major points on offer. The car's actually on fire underneath the bodywork. Max directing the fire marshal to get that fire extinguisher in and put it out before any further damage is done. Don't forget, some of these components, engines, gearboxes, they have to be reused under the current regulations. We don't want fire damaging those things beyond repair. Let's listen to what happened to Max Verstappen's car.
Down the gears into turn 1 and then just loses the screen on the steering wheel, just completely conking out.
First has some weird fluid. Right, everything is at top.
Max Verstappen there just reiterating what happened on track.
Smells some weird fluid. Yep. That will not be good. Virtual safety car is out. That is great news for the people who haven't stopped yet. Alonso, Magnussen, those are the 2 key players that can come in and maybe get a cheap stop, but the car is parked up really nicely by an exit gap, so they'll get this off nice and quickly.
Yeah, that looked like for Max Verstappen there, they lost all electrics, potentially because of something else, a hydraulic failure that could have come from all manner of different circumstances, but the dashboard went clear, he lost all control of the car and it ground to a halt. And here comes Fernando Alonso in for that pit stop. We said he needed something. We needed a safety car. He got a virtual safety car, not quite as good as the safety car for him, but a virtual safety car nonetheless will enable him to make that pit stop without quite the same loss he would have otherwise suffered.
As Kevin Magnussen exits the pits, the virtual safety car will be ending. I tell you, he didn't come in. Alex Albon didn't come in to stop. He's made his way up to 7th at the moment. Kevin Magnussen coming out of the pit lane, but he's fallen all the way back to plumb last. So work to do for the Haas driver. The green flag is waved. We are back underway here in Melbourne for the 3rd round of the F1 World Championship. It is BBC Radio 5 Live's coverage. Myself, Harry Benjamin, joined by former chief mechanic for McLaren, Mark Priestley and Jenny Gow.
Can't work out why Alexander Albon in the Williams didn't pit there. He's the only driver not to have stopped. He could have come in for a slightly cheaper pit stop under the virtual safety car. Maybe Williams misjudged it. Maybe they sent something else. They want to wait out for a full safety car. Who knows? But certainly Alonso is now on the medium tyres and in P12. Magnussen falls to P16, but they should be racier than everybody else. Let's see what they can make up.
Bottas coming under a little bit of pressure further back in the pack in his Alfa Romeo. He's out of the points right now in 11th, being hunted down by Mick Schumacher in the Haas and Fernando Alonso, who is now on that quicker medium tyre. He's going to try and get that up to speed and get as much heat into it as possible. Expect to see some moves being made from the feisty Spaniard, the wily old fox, one of the most experienced driver on the grid now after we lost Kimi Raikkonen to retirement last year. 11th for Bottas on the main straight. DRS wide open for Mick Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. Allows them to close up. No moves made just yet through turn 1. How close can they follow? Mick Schumacher gets under the rear wing of the Alfa Romeo of Bottas in front. Bottas going to try and defend coming down into turn 3. Actually, he doesn't. He leaves that inside line open, but Mick Schumacher does the same thing as well. Alonso decides, I'm going to go down the inside, gets ever so close to the Haas in front of him, nearly touching his front left to Schumacher's rear right. They all make it safely through in the same order as they stand. Bottas 11th, Schumacher 12th, Alonso 13th.
And that's one of the most frustrating things about this circuit from a driving perspective. We've got a car there in Alonso with DRS that was so much quicker on fresher tyres than the cars in front, but just not enough space to get round. And leaving contact there. We just saw contact between the Aston Martin and who's that? That is the Alfa Romeo of Bottas.
Stroll made me to go off the track. Just revealing overtake.
They actually touched wheels. Sorry, that was Bottas with his radio.
Yeah, well, I think that happened just before. I think we saw that fight because that's why Bottas is further back, because Stroll is up to 9th right now. So Bottas losing out and being punted off basically nearly into the gravel on the exit of turn 3. So Stroll 9th, Gasly 10th. So they managed to skate through. Gasly now all over the back of the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. DRS has a little look, can't be done.
Just having a look, Max Verstappen's walked back into the paddock. Very sad look on his face as it stands. Perez radio.
What was the problem with Max?
Yeah, don't worry about Max. Not relevant for our car.
No, tell us what the problem was. We ought to know, and you're not going to tell us the truth for ages. Shame. Perez doing his best pit lane reporter job.
Yeah, they clearly don't want to worry him too much, do they, Mark? Because surely they say it's not relevant, but what can happen on one car can happen on another, can't it?
They're just trying to keep Perez focused on the job in hand, and giving him technical information on another car will only start to make him think about that problem on his own car. It's a psychological thing.
But in fairness, they had to replace parts on Max Verstappen's car overnight before this race got underway. They had problems with the car. They didn't have that on Perez's, so maybe it is quite car specific. Who knows? As things stand, I was going to say Charles Leclerc will lead the championship on 71 points, collecting 26 from today. If he can win, commentators curse withstanding, then it would be George Russell in second place in the championship on 37 points. A whole gaggle of them behind that. But listen to this: Ferrari would be leading the Constructors' Championship on 104 points. Mercedes in second place on 65.
Well, we talked so much about this being a disaster start for Mercedes. To still be second in the Constructors' Championship is a pretty decent damage limitation. A few notices from the stewards' room. It's a 5-second time penalty for Lance Stroll for weaving on the straight. Also him and Bottas. That incident has been noted where Stroll forced Bottas out wide. So Lance Stroll might be paying a few trips to the stewards' room after this race. Former F1 driver Enrico Bernoldi, part of the race stewards lineup this weekend. But it is lap 43 of 58. Max Verstappen is currently sat talking to his engineer. That's because he is out of this race alongside Sebastian Vettel and Carlos Sainz. 3 drivers out of this race. Leclerc leads from Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. George Russell in the Mercedes heads Lewis Hamilton in 4th. Norris is in 5th, and that's the top 5. 15 laps to go, Jenny.
Yeah, the gap between Verstappen and Leclerc after this race, if it finishes like this, would be a whopping 46 points in the championship from what could have, if you take in Bahrain results and potentially here, 2 DNFs through reliability. That's costly for Red Bull, and I'm sure questions will be asked to Christian Horner.
Certainly will be. We've just seen a replay as well of the weaving incident between Lance Stroll and Valtteri Bottas on the main straight. What did you make of that, Mark?
Slam dunk. Yeah, you're only really allowed to make one move, one big change of direction. It wasn't in the braking zone, but he was weaving back and forth to keep Valtteri Bottas behind him. And there may be more to come for Lance Stroll, because it was later on that same lap where they actually made contact and Stroll actually potentially forced Valtteri Bottas off the circuit. Max Verstappen dropping out of this race, of course. On a very obvious level, it's a great news for Charles Leclerc, But in terms of the gap that he now has over Sergio Perez, 13 seconds, Sergio in second place, no major threat to the Ferrari. Whereas the big winners, of course, have been Mercedes here, because they are nailed on for a podium. Who's it going to be, though? George Russell currently in third place. Lewis Hamilton, we talked about him potentially saving tyres and looking after them for the end of the race. He's in fourth, just a couple of seconds, 1.5 seconds back from his teammate.
You know what's really fascinating actually right now? We're seeing a big battle develop for 9th place. That's Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Fernando Alonso and Zhou Guanyu all involved in that. Ocon is just a little bit up the road. But Alex Albon in the Williams started plumb last in 7th, hasn't pitted, but is keeping pace as Gasly gets all over the back of Lance Stroll for 9th. So Stroll holding up a traffic jam, and that's allowing Ocon and Albon up the road. So this is working out a little bit for the Williams and Albon.
Caution, Lance, no weaving when defending.
Lance Stroll, his engineer, just warning him. I don't think they've told him perhaps he's got a penalty, but just warning him, do not do that again.
Yeah, just looking at the stewards' boards, interesting turn 3 incident involving Stroll and Bottas reviewed, but no further action for forcing another driver off the track. So I think Stroll got lucky there, Mark, from what you were saying. In your opinion, it would have been a slam dunk.
Maybe I'd be a harsh steward.
You are harsh. I think we could gather for that.
Lance Stroll fighting for his life right now, defending from Pierre Gasly down the inside into turn 3, keeps Gasly behind him in the AlphaTauri. The Frenchman chasing the Canadian, who has had, as you say, a bit of an up and down weekend, finding the walls and just about maintaining that at the moment. This is live coverage on BBC Radio 5 Live of the Australian Grand Prix. Myself, Harry Benjamin, alongside Mark Priestley, former chief F1 mechanic, Jenny Gow here too. Big weekend of sport on 5 Live. Premier League coverage gets underway from 2 o'clock. We've also got Manchester City versus Liverpool from 4:30. Ian Dennis and Peter Schmeichel will be here to take you through the coverage of that. Then from 8 o'clock in the evening UK time, it's the 4th and final day of the Masters from Augusta. Mark Chapman leads the coverage. Scotty Scheffler is leading the way at 9 under. The Australian Cameron Smith is second. The leading Brit is Danny Willett in 8, but he is a bit of a way off. Back to the on-track action now as the Haas makes his way through. I think that was Kevin Magnussen on Yuki Tsunoda for 15th.
Yeah, it was. And just ahead of them was that gaggle of cars being led by Lance Stroll, or being held up, I should say, by Lance Stroll. 5 cars in a train behind him. And don't forget, Lance Stroll, with a 5-second penalty, even if it stays like this at the end of the race, he drops immediately right to the back of that group. So frustrating for all of those guys behind him at the moment.
Frustration for Esteban Ocon in the Alpine as well. He's been told that he needs to cool the car. Temps worryingly high for him, but he's in that battle, so he's going to lose spots from 8th.
This is a really big battle developing right now, actually. More and more cars joining all the time. Stroll, Gasly currently heading that field. The sound you're hearing is on board the Alpine of Fernando Alonso. This is him getting past Mick Schumacher, who just goes a little bit heavy on the brakes, locks up, goes deep into turn 3, and that allows Alonso to make the most of that and go around the outside. He gains position. One Haas moving down, the other moving up. Kevin Magnussen making his way through into 15th. Yuki Tsunoda and Nicholas Latifi, currently the last of the runners, in 16th and 17th. We have lost Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel and Carlos Sainz early doors. We've had a couple of safety car periods and what has been, well, a bit of a hectic Australian Grand Prix. We are seeing passing, but perhaps not as much as we would have hoped for with the changes that they've made to this Albert Park circuit. At the lap 47 marker of 58, it is Charles Leclerc who leads in the Ferrari. 14 seconds the gap to Sergio Perez, now the leading Red Bull in second, the leading and only Red Bull on track in second. George Russell heads the Mercedes third and fourth. Then it's Norris fifth, Ricciardo sixth, Albon, who has yet to stop, in seventh in his Williams, Ocon eighth, Stroll ninth and Gasly in 10th. And that is the beginning of a huge midfield battle that also involves Bottas, Alonso, Schumacher, Zhou and Magnussen. So that is the battle from 9th all the way to 15th place. Massive amount of on-track action going on there. Tsunoda 16th, Latifi 17th.
Yeah, we'll keep a very close eye on that, because it's Stroll that's the bottle, or the cork rather, in that bottle right now, holding everybody up. As I say, it's not working out for him because more and more cars are joining that group, given that he's slowing them all up. And actually, in effect, when that 5-second penalty is applied to his race time at the end of the Grand Prix, the more cars that are bunched up in that train, the more positions he'll drop towards the back as a result of that. But out front, it's a one-horse race. It's a prancing horse, isn't it? It's one horse of Charles Leclerc, one Ferrari left in the race, one Red Bull. But that Red Bull of Sergio Perez, 14 seconds back now. So, Charles Leclerc, an absolute masterclass. He's kept it under control so far, right from the very beginning. One moment where he came under a brief spell of threat was at the end of the second safety car, where Max Verstappen got up underneath the rear wing, but he dealt with it well, and now he's looking like he's in a great position to take this race win.
Let's go for the fastest lap at the end.
Almost like rubbing salt into the wound for the rest of the field. Charles Leclerc, already with a 14.3 seconds gap, wants to go and set the fastest lap too. He's feeling very comfortable, Jenny.
Already with the fastest lap as well. So does that, I mean, that's amazing. He's so comfortable.
Are we... We're not surprised that Ferrari is so fast, because they have been all season long, but to have a 14-second gap, that is surprising.
Well, Verstappen's not there, remember, and if Verstappen was there, I think that gap might be slightly smaller, but only a tiny bit.
Yeah, Mark, 10 laps to go. This is Leclerc's to lose now, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. I mean, they've been dominant. They've been dominant in race day. They haven't been dominant all weekend. They did a brilliant qualifying, of course.
Who is the Alpha Tauri?
Gasly.
I mean, I don't get it. Why he don't overtake?
Fernando Alonso complaining he's in that huge fight for, well, it's for 9th really. Stroll, Gasly in 10th he's referring to there. Bottas 11th and Alonso in 12th. So Alonso not happy, and this has ruined Alonso's race. They tried the gamble to go on the harder, slower tyre at the start of this race. They benefited ever so slightly, I suppose, by coming in to change to the medium, quicker tyre under the virtual safety car. But being caught in this bottleneck of a midfield has really not helped his day.
You know, when you're driving down the motorway and there's somebody in the fast lane not going quickly enough, and you just want them out of the way, that is exactly what Fernando Alonso is feeling right now.
Yeah,
exactly.
Priestley gets road rage. Obviously, the person in front's going at 68 and you're going at 69, clearly. Just as it stands right now, a reminder, Leclerc leads the championship if it finishes like this, with 71 points from Russell, who would be in second place in the championship, not the race, with 37 points. Radio.
Everything. Push now. Everything you got, mate.
Everything you've got for Lance Stroll. He is currently in a point-scoring position. He doesn't have to pit again. A reminder, Lance Stroll has been to the pits the most amount of time. 3 times he's been into the pits. Longer than that, actually.
But he has got a 5-second time penalty, which is the thing that's going to hold him back. So that's what he wants to say. I'll just carry on quickly. Sainz, 33 points. Perez with 30 points. And Hamilton in 5th place with 28 points. Verstappen, 6th in the championship, 25 points. And Red Bull, as it stands, will be 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. 55 points to 65 for Mercedes, to 104 for Ferrari, and we're 3 races in.
Excellent math skills, Jenny.
Thanks. Calculator.
Yeah, you are right. So Lance Stroll being told to push because he has also got that 5-second time penalty. That would drop him well out of the points right now. But doing a sterling job of keeping Pierre Gasly behind, who does seem like he is a much faster car right now. But under DRS on the main straight, Stroll goes defensive. Gasly forced to go to the outside. The blue and white Alpha Tauri skirts round the outside, cuts across the Aston Martin. Gasly through on Stroll, finally, after many a lap behind the Canadian, who is now coming under all sorts of pressure. Is this the release now of that midfield pack? Gasly is through for 9th. Bottas wants to follow as soon as possible. We're on board with the Alfa Romeo Finnish driver, the former Mercedes man who won the last Australian Grand Prix in 2019. He won't be going for podium glory today, but he will be trying to steal a point. He will get it with Stroll's penalty, but he'll be hoping to try and get in front and then make up a little bit of ground and try and steal some more from Gasly too.
And Fernando Alonso just behind Valtteri Bottas. We heard the frustration on his radio message earlier that Gasly just wouldn't get past Stroll. Well, Gasly's done that now. Alonso now trying to cool his car. We've heard his teammate being given that instruction. Alonso seemingly doing the same, having just dropped back. Now needs to push up, because as Stroll starts to tumble down the order, there are opportunities for those behind.
We're saying that one person hasn't been into the pits yet. Alexander Albon in the Williams, P7. When he comes in, that will shuffle the race up. Currently 51 laps done of 58.
As you hear the sound of Sergio Perez coming into the penultimate corner, the late braking left-hander, and a little bit of late braking, slight lock-up on the front left. That forces him onto the grass. His teammate spun there during practice, but he keeps it pointing in the right direction. That would have cost him a bit of time. Time lost as well for Mick Schumacher into turn 1, who loses it going into turn 1. Forced to take onto the grass and loses a couple positions. So he's now behind his teammate in 15th, behind Kevin Magnussen and Zhou Guanyu managed to squeeze through as well. The Chinese racer in his rookie season currently occupying 13th.
And that little mistake from Perez has opened the gap up to Leclerc to 19.3 seconds. That is a pit stop worth of gap. Not that he needs to make one, but we heard Leclerc talking about let's go for fastest lap. I don't think he needs a soft tyre to do that, but he's even got that now available to him if he wanted it.
Yeah, he's been hammering in fastest laps of fun every time recently that he's gone round a lap of this Albert Park circuit. The Ferrari just looks so beautifully at home here. What could Carlos Sainz have done if he hadn't have spun out on those hard tyres at the beginning of this race?
How frustrating for him.
Lap 52 and 58 getting into the closing stages. This is BBC Radio 5 Live's coverage of the Australian Grand Prix. It is round 3 of the F1 World Championship. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is currently leading this race. Nearly a 20-second gap to Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. And George Russell is in third ahead of Lewis Hamilton in fourth. Norris the top 5. Home hero Daniel Ricciardo is in sixth. We have lost from this race Carlos Sainz early doors, spinning out into the gravel on harder cold tyres too. Vettel we've lost from this race as well. He crashed into the wall, and Max Verstappen, the reigning champion, is out of this race due to potentially a fluid problem. He pulled off with fire coming out of the back of his car into turn 1. He is now out and back into the pits. So drama all the way through this race at the moment, but moves still being made. Coming up a little bit later on, we've got breakfast on 5 Live from 8 o'clock. Laura Whitmore is here from 10. Then it's Premier League football coverage. We've got Manchester City versus Liverpool from 4:30. Ian Dennis and Peter Schmeichel here guiding you through that coverage. And then from 8 o'clock UK time in the evening, it's the 4th and final day of the Masters from Augusta. Scotty Scheffler leading the way at 9 under. Right now, though, it is live coverage in the closing stages of this Australian Grand Prix. Big fight in the midfield currently going on right now. Myself, Harry Benjamin, joined by former chief F1 mechanic for McLaren, Mark Priestley. Jenny Gow here too. And Alonso's been making a few moves in these last few laps, but he's really struggling and falling back in that big fight, which is really over now. 9th position with Gasly 9th, Bottas 10th, Stroll 11th, Zhou 12th, Magnussen 13th, Alonso 14th.
Just looking at Hamilton, he's trying to close the gap on Russell, his teammate. He's now just coming into the 1 second gap, just over 1 second, but I wonder what they'll do. Hamilton saved his tyres. He was sensible. Russell went in for a real battle with Perez. Is this going to be costly for Russell? What will the team do, more importantly?
Well, from a team perspective, they don't need this fight. There's no threat from behind. There's no opportunity in front. Perez is 20 seconds, 17 seconds up the road from George Russell. Behind them, they've got another 17-second gap back to the nearest McLaren of Lando Norris. So these are two Mercedes on their own. This is going to be interesting. You're right, Jenny, because Lewis Hamilton will want to stamp his authority on this battle.
Can we go for the fastest lap now before traffic, please?
No, negative. We have the fastest lap and we don't think anyone can beat it.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Charles Leclerc on the radio, all he's thinking about is fastest lap. He wants the extra point that you get for it, but his race engineer just nearly having to sort of calm him down a little bit.
Just explain to people, I mean, is he saying he wants to come in and pit stop and get onto the soft tyre to be able to go out there and do like the fastest fast lap at the end of this race? It sounds like that's what he's saying, but that would be madness.
I think that is what he's saying. He's got a pit stop's worth of gap behind, but it's an unnecessary risk. Yeah, just. It's an unnecessary risk. He doesn't need to. Exactly as his engineer said, he's got the fastest lap already. I can't see anybody out there who can threaten that. Verstappen might have been one of the only ones to even have the possibility to do that, and he's now gone from this race. Perez not looking comfortable. Leclerc's on his own. He's very comfortable. I think he's probably got even more time in hand if he wanted to on the tyres he's currently on. So he needs to just get his head down and get on with this race.
Hey guys, I'm in a really difficult position.
Hamilton not happy at all on the radio, being told or telling them that they put him in a difficult position. Meanwhile, action in the pit lane. Fernando Alonso comes in and goes on to another set of the medium yellow wall tyres as well.
Albon's not even been in yet for one pit stop, and Alonso's coming for two. Albon is going to have to pit. It's regulatory that you have to come in and change tyres. It's lap 55. He's clearly going to try and go onto the soft and get racy, but he's not leaving any time to get racy. This is a weird one for Albon.
I've got to say that message from Lewis Hamilton is harsh from my perspective, because it's not necessarily the team that's put him in that position. It was the fortuitous moment the safety car came out that actually lended itself to George Russell. It was George Russell that catapulted himself up the order with a lucky timing of a safety car. So I'm not sure that was a team decision that's put Lewis in tricky spot. Just the luck of the draw.
Further back in the mid-pack, Bottas is through on Pierre Gasly for 9th, and that is because Pierre Gasly, the Frenchman in the Alpha Tauri car, went off into the grass for a little excursion into turn 13, the penultimate corner around this revised Albert Park. We're in Melbourne, Australia for the third round of the F1 World Championship. Charles Leclerc currently looks on course to extend his championship lead in his Ferrari with the fastest lap, and currently collecting 26 points if he can hold on to it. He's got a big gap, 19.8 seconds to Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Then comes George Russell and Lewis Hamilton in third and fourth, getting ever closer. Potentially the first intra-team battle and decisions are going to have to be made, but they're running out of time. It's lap 56 of 58. Norris is fifth ahead of McLaren's Ricciardo, the two McLaren drivers in fifth and sixth. Albon in the Williams, yet to stop, is in seventh place ahead of Ocon, who is managing an issue in his Alpine in eighth, ahead of Bottas and Gasly, the top 10. Then it's Stroll, Zhou, Magnussen, Schumacher, Tsunoda, the top 15, Latifi and Alonso, currently the last of the runners, but he has just come in for a pit stop to try something different. He was getting stuck in that midfield. Nothing to lose for Fernando now.
Yeah, this has been a strong weekend for Mercedes, given the troubles that they've been going through with their car since the start of this season. They've executed brilliantly on what was a difficult set of circumstances. They've been beaten consistently this weekend by the McLaren team, also sharing, of course, that Mercedes engine, and yet in the race, it's the two Mercedes ahead of the two McLarens right now. So a job well done for the team in silver.
Just a quick note, Sebastian Vettel, after that crash in the Aston Martin, did go to the medical centre. He has just come out of the medical centre, so assume that is good news. Fingers crossed.
Good news to hear that as well. Vettel out of the car, one of 3 retirements from this race, along with Carlos Sainz, who he lost in the opening couple of laps. He started well out of position, down in 9th. Started on the alternate tyre, the harder tyre, lost a lot of positions at the start, and then skidded off into the gravel, out of this race and beached. Max Verstappen out as well. The reigning champion was in second in this race, having to pull over due to a potential fluid leak. He pulled off, stopped, fire out the back of his car. He is now out and back into the pits. That has allowed Leclerc to extend his lead from the sister Red Bull of Sergio Perez. George Russell is third. Further back, we've got the two Hasses fighting as well. Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen on alternate tyres. Magnussen on the harder tyre. That's currently the closest gap. 6/10 of a second on track right now. They're going to have to get out of the way, though, because Leclerc is coming up to lap them.
Yeah, blue flags will be coming out very shortly. Got to say, Magnussen and Alonso, we talked about that battle where they were wheel to wheel earlier on. That's going to be investigated by the stewards after the race. Alonso and Magnussen. Alonso now stopped to make his pit stop, of course, dropped further down, so no longer wheel to wheel anymore, but that's something the stewards will be looking at after the Grand Prix.
Has anyone told Alexander Albon that he hasn't pitted yet and he needs to come in?
He's just loving life.
He's currently P7. He has to come in. He'll get disqualified if he doesn't come in, won't he? He hasn't used two tyres.
He's just started the final lap of the race, I believe, and so either the graphic is wrong and we're not aware of a pit stop that was made earlier on. Here comes Alex Albon now, so we'll see. He's coming around the last part of the lap now. He has to either duck into the pits here, if that graphic is correct. He's coming through towards turn 9. If he is on the same set of tyres that he started the race, as all the information that we've got in front of us says so, he needs to stop this time, otherwise he will be in breach of regulations and will be disqualified.
You would feel that way? Still going. Jet lag kicking in.
Sergio Perez to his engineer, probably wondering why he's not being spoken to that much, but it's because I suppose there's not much going on around him at the moment. 19 seconds the gap to the leader, 4 seconds back to Russell. You're right, Albon does need to come in, but he's started last. He was disqualified from qualifying, so he's just going as long as he can, and he has now come into the pits. So Williams were trying something different. Who would have thought what could happen in this race? And it hasn't quite panned out. Albon will drop out of the points with that, but it's a valiant run for Alex Albon in the Williams on his return to Formula One. But as we come out of the final corner, undeterred, he has led nearly every single lap of this race. Charles Leclerc in the Scarlet Ferrari wins the Australian Grand Prix. It's his second win of the season. Charles Leclerc takes home the fastest lap as well. Sergio Perez will come back to take a podium in second place. He comes out of the final corner, and it's still a battle between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, but a couple couple of seconds between it now, so it looks like Russell will be on course to get his first podium for Mercedes, and his first podium on a live racing track as well for George Russell. Hamilton in 4th, Lando Norris will come home in 5th. For the British drivers, it is 3rd, 4th and 5th. Although, I don't want to speak too soon because Ricciardo is hunting down his teammate, the Australian on home soil, 3/10 the gap. Is it going to be a drag to the line? Can Daniel Ricciardo get DRS? I think Norris has just got a little bit more left in the tank. He does. He crosses the line and confirms 5th place. Ricciardo tops, it's the top 6, but Charles Leclerc, beautiful drive, and he did get that fastest lap too, Mark.
Yeah, full haul of points this weekend, an absolutely dominant display.
And P1.
Yes! Let's go, come on, yes!
And fastest lap.
I wanted to do it.
We know you did, Charles.
Oh, what a... Oh, amazing. The car was incredible today, really. Well done, guys. What a race and what a pace. I mean,
it makes you wonder as well how far Sainz could have got through the field starting from 9th. But that does mean, Jenny Gal, that Charles Leclerc extends his championship lead.
Yeah, 26 points in the bag for him today. That takes him up to a total of 71 points. Russell, 37 points in P2. Sainz didn't finish the race, but he remains in he's in P3 with 33 points. And then it's Perez on 30 points, Hamilton 28, Verstappen in 6th. 25 points. That's a whopping 46-point difference.
And I think Alex Albon might have stolen a point in 10th.
He managed to, didn't he?
Well played by Williams and Alex Albon there. Now that they've all crossed the line.
Yeah. Sorry there for Max, guys. But it goes for Rocky and Jeff. Good start to our season, but a lot of work to do still.
Yeah, well done, Checo. That was a solid weekend for you. Well done. It was a good drive today.
Christian Horner in the latter part of that message just saying well done to Sergio Perez. Mixed fortunes for the Red Bull driver. Of course, referring to Rocky there as well. Guilherme Rocky, what's the last name? Rocky? I'll just call him Rocky.
Rocky will do. It's absolutely fine.
Rocky will do. I've been pronouncing that name all weekend as well. And of course, he was Sebastian Vettel's race engineer during his Red Bull dominant years. Later, then moved on as the lead trackside engineer. He is now stepping back to work on the Red Bull Junior program. So taking a step back from on-track duties, so nice to be rewarded with a podium at least.
Brilliant. Obviously got a little bit fortunate there, but part of the game. Let's chase some more podiums now.
George Russell, of course, did get a podium in Spa last year, but only completed a couple of laps behind the safety car, so we won't talk. A bit controversial on that one. So has now got a proper podium, I suppose you'd say, perhaps, but great stuff from George Russell, who's looked at home in that Mercedes, getting the best out of it so far this year and coming home ahead of Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, just as a side note, it's worth noting Rocky is stepping away from Red Bull's trackside operations, but actually it's Jean-Pierre Lambiase who's going to be stepping up and taking on the role of race engineer for Sebastian Vettel, as well as the director of trackside engineering, or something along the lines of that trackside title. I don't think I've nailed it. Let's brush over that.
I don't think any of us did on that.
Either way, that is a seriously double commitment, isn't it, when it comes to your responsibilities on a race weekend, trying to rescue Verstappen's potential title championship challenge whilst also managing everything else around you.
Yeah, it is a big job, really big job, very serious one, but he's a top man and he'll be up for it, I've no doubt. But what a dominant display by Ferrari this weekend in the hands of Charles Leclerc, and a real shame for Red Bull. The big winners, I would say, Mercedes getting the most out of their car for sure. The two McLarens also having a solid weekend in 5th and 6th. So lots of winners, particularly Charles Leclerc. The big loser, of course, being Max Verstappen.
Yeah, no points on the board once again for the Dutch racer, the reigning champion, not with the ideal start to his championship challenge. Charles Leclerc pulls into Parc Fermé, gets rid of his headrest and slowly unfurls himself from the cockpit of that scarlet red Ferrari.
Wow, just look at him, the number 16 ablazing on the side of his helmet. He fist bumps as well. He is so delighted with the performance. That was absolute perfection for him. There was one moment, wasn't there, when he could have lost the race to Verstappen, but it was his. It was his clean and easy in the end.
He had it all under control. It was Leclerc who won ahead of Perez and Russell, Hamilton fourth, Norris the top five, Ricciardo, Ocon, Bottas, Gasly and Alexander Albon stealing his first point of the year by running all the way to the very final lap and getting a pit stop in right at the end. He holds on to a point. Superb drive for the Williams racer. Zhou Guanyu just missing out in 11th. Lance Stroll with a penalty, held up the midfield pack for so long. He comes home in 12th ahead of the two Haas drivers. Schumacher finishing in front of Kevin Magnussen. Then it's Tsunoda in 15th, Latifi 16th, and Alonso couldn't really do anything with that late pit stop in 17th. Last of the runners. We lost, of course, Max Verstappen. Sebastian Vettel 2 through his Aston Martin into the wall, and Carlos Sainz through his Ferrari into the gravel.
Charles Leclerc celebrating. George Russell goes up to him in his black Mercedes overalls and just shakes his hand. Sergio Perez there as well, waiting to take to the podium, just getting weighed. And I just have to say, as you said, hats off to Alexander Albon, but will he throw his hat into the debate for driver of the day just because it was an incredible performance? Oh, we'll have that debate in the podcast. Make sure you download it. Subscribe now to the Checkered Flag. Plenty of entertainment throughout the season to keep you busy if you like your Formula One.
Certainly, as Leclerc gives a run through his hair, getting rid of that helmet hair as well. Well, thank you for joining us as well for what was a real up and down race, but it showed a lot of promise, especially from that Ferrari. The post-race interviews will be held by Mark Webber. Stick with 5 Live. Breakfast is coming up from 8. Laura Whitmore is here from 10th. Premier League coverage, Man City versus Liverpool, gets going from 4:30, and then of course we've got the fourth and final day of the Masters from Augusta from 8 o'clock. Mark Webber is with George Russell.
Well, George Russell, a fantastic podium performance, mate. A little bit lucky with the safety car, but ultimately, mate, you drove an extraordinary race. You must be stoked with the performance of the car today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got to be in it to win it and capitalise from others' misfortune. And obviously, we got a little bit lucky today, probably twice. But, you know, we take it. And there's so much hard work going on back at base, Bracklin, Brixworth to try and get us back to the front. So, you know, to be standing on the podium is special.
I saw you off camera just here, going to your team, going to the mechanics. It just means so much to you guys, given the start that you've had and the high standards that Mercedes and the organisation has. Must be, you know, to get a podium for yourself. Lewis has had one in Bahrain. You're always there. You never give the opposition a free pass, do you?
No, we're never going to give up. You know, we got to keep on fighting. And this weekend we was a long way behind our rivals, but here we are standing on the podium. So, you know, we've got to keep us up while we're on the back foot, and I'm sure we'll get there after a few more races.
Looking forward to the next one, buddy. What do you think there? Getting back to Europe, upgrades?
I think it's going to take some time until we can fight these boys in red and blue. They look pretty exceptional at the moment, but if anyone can, Mercedes can, so let's go for it.
Well done, George. Good job. Sergio, great drive, mate. I think you got everything out of the car today. You did what you could. The start looked a little bit tricky down into turn 1. Run us through that first of all.
Yeah, that was a bit tricky, you know, getting my position. Lewis overtook me down the inside. He broke really late. He had a really good turn 1, and yeah, after that it was about getting him, then the virtual safety car and so on. My first thing was very poor in terms of degradation. We struggled quite a lot. Then on the hard, yeah, with the safety car, we were a bit unlucky there. We lost 2 positions, which we recovered later. Yeah, it's a good result, but unfortunately we lost Max. You know, it would have been great to have a double podium for the team. But yeah, looking forward, you know, we've been a bit too unlucky in the first 2 races.
Absolutely. Run us through that move with Lewis around the outside into the fast chicane. It looked like, you know, it was a phenomenal move, and then on the safety car sort of helped him from the fight back with you on the run down to turn 11.
Yeah, always with Lewis. He's very entertaining. Very hard racer, but very fair, and yeah, we always have good fun together.
Well, John, enjoy your flight back to Mexico tonight, mate. And here's the man of the moment, my God. Driver of the day, fastest lap. Mate, you were on another level today. Record crowd here in Australia. It was a phenomenal turnout to see your performance today. Your 4th Grand Prix victory. Was that the easiest win of your career so far, mate?
In Formula One, it's the first one where we control a little bit the gap. And honestly, what a car today. I mean, yeah, of course, I did a good job all weekend, but it was not possible without the car. And this weekend, especially in the race pace, we were extremely strong. Tyre felt great from the first lap to the last lap. We were managing the tyres extremely well, and I'm just so happy.
Yeah, well done, mate. Run us through those restarts, because you had to deal with 2 of those. A little bit nerve-wracking on the front straight with the restarts, making sure that you didn't have to deal with Max, you know, on the brakes for turn 1 or turn 3.
Was very difficult, especially the safety car restart. I had a huge understeer into the last corner, and I was like, "Whoa, it's going to be difficult to keep that first position." But then, then we managed to do so. And after the first 2-3 corners, I managed to regain the grip, and then the pace was back. So incredible to win here.
Just one last one. I heard on the radio on the in-lap, I'm starting to sense a little bit of belief here. You know, this momentum, the car's been very strong on all types of circuits now. You must be looking forward to getting back to Europe and see if this momentum can really start to put a huge campaign to fight against everyone that can, throw the battle against you guys.
Yeah, well, obviously we're only at the third race, so it's difficult to think about the championship. But to be honest, we've got a very strong car, a very reliable car too, and for now we've always been there. So I hope it continues like this, and if it does, then we probably have chances for the championship, which obviously makes me smile after the last 2 years that have been difficult for the team and obviously for myself. So it's great to be back in this position.
A lot of Italian fans here in Melbourne. Go and enjoy the podium. Well done.
Well, Charles Leclerc is the winner of the Australian Grand Prix, and he has some advantage now at the top of the championship. 71 points, a 46-point lead over Max Verstappen, and he said there, reliability, and that's going to be key to this championship run. Harry Benjamin talks us through the race, and it's been costly for Verstappen. 36 points he's lost this season because the car didn't get over the line.
And yeah, that is now 2 out of the first 3 that he has scored 0 points. Nil points for the reigning champion. It's not been the best of starts. They clearly have a fast car, but certainly outpaced here. And unlike Ferrari, they're trying to deal with reliability at the same time. It looked like it struck them and they got over it in Saudi Arabia, but it's come back to bite them once more. A different issue, but affecting one of their cars. They can't afford to be doing that for much longer.
Yeah, an issue that's bitten them really, really hard. They were lucky in a way, weren't they, that Carlos Sainz wasn't up there in the mix in the Ferrari, but the bells will be ringing out in Maranello. Another flag will be planted at the factory gates to symbolise another win. And Mark, just how positive is it for Formula One that Ferrari are now in the mix?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked for years, haven't we, about how Formula One needs Ferrari as much as Ferrari needs Formula One. And look, they are part of the fabric of this sport. But more than just Ferrari, we needed some more competition at the front of this field. We needed more teams battling for race wins and championships. It's been dominated, the sport, by one team and notably one driver for a very long time now. It's been shaken up with the 2022 regulations. And of course, that was a big part of why they were done in the first place. So early signs are good.
The fans flooding onto the track now, a record-breaking number in attendance. It's a sign that COVID may be just allowing us to live our lives a little bit more. The biggest sporting weekend ever in Australian sporting history. Harry Benjamin, it's been a perfect background and a backdrop to the third race of the season, hasn't it?
Oh, it's brilliant. The festival atmosphere in Melbourne is just, you can just see it everywhere you go. Everyone's so happy to have Formula One back in Australia. Of course, Australia being affected quite severely by all the lockdown measures as well, more so than perhaps than a lot of the rest of the world. So even the likes of Daniel Ricciardo, who came home in 6th in the end, scoring good points for McLaren. I think he'll be pleased with that. Didn't quite get the best of Lando Norris, but those two running together all race long. I gotta say, I don't think the track changes really yielded what we wanted. But
no, I'm not ending on a positive note. Harry Benjamin, that is enough. Enough.
But I thought it was still an entertaining race.
You did a great job today. Go rest up.
Up until that point.
Yeah, up until that point. Mark Priestley as well, thank you very much. 2 weeks' time, we will be in Imola, Italy. What will the Ferrari fans make of that? It will be an incredible sight to see, to hear on your radio, so make sure you join us for that. Can Charles Leclerc do it again? Just maybe. Let's hand you back to Chris Warburton. The time is 7:45 on your Sunday morning. Chris,
yes.
That was a good win for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, but I'm very concerned. Have you done your Wordle this morning yet?
Don't get straight into that. For goodness sakes.
I had to. You left the goal wide open.
I had all your fans ganging up on me on social media yesterday over all
I
of
have
this.
fans? That was my mum, Chris. Come on, we know that.
Hey, I didn't even know that it was Imola. Given everything with Ferrari, did you say that's next week or the week after?
2 weeks' time. It's
time.
going to be incredible. Wow. I think it's a sprint race as well. So we've got a race on the Saturday and then another race on the Sunday. And I think the fans will make the atmosphere absolutely incredible.
I remember when I've gone to Grand Prix, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there's always that sea of red somewhere, isn't there? Those Ferrari fans somewhere in the world. But Imola, my goodness me, I didn't even know. Verstappen, Hamilton, we've been so used to it, haven't we, Jenny? How nice is it, as someone who follows this day in, day out, to just see that being broken up this season, at this stage at least?
Yeah, it's really exciting to see other names, other teams in the mix, and especially for Charles Leclerc. He's had such an emotional history. He lost his father quite young. He lost Jules Bianchi, his godparent, in a crash in Formula One as well. And so for him to now be standing on the top step of the podium, having won a race and won it with relative ease, I think a lot of people will feel their heartstrings being tugged. And I can see the Ferrari team underneath the podium. A few of them have got tears in their eyes. This means so much to them, to the Tifosi. They wanted to be back at the top, and they are by some margin.
The Tifosi, that was it. That was the word I was looking for. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's too long for Wordle.
I wouldn't know. But look, I would love to say go and put your feet up and rest easy, but I think we're going to speak to you again in an hour's time because, you know, we get new listeners all the time, Jenny, so we're going to need you again. I'm sorry. So
it's okay. We've got the podcast to record as well.
So
we're
do that. Right.
We're on cloud nine. Well, we're delighted.
You crack on with that. We'll get through everything else and we'll chat to you in about an hour's time. Thank you very much indeed, Jenny and the team there in Australia.